Okay, now is it on? Okay. So in the last class, as I was saying, we started talking about India-Russia relations. Our first and most important task was to understand why this relationship is important. And that is not a difficult task to accomplish if we know that significance of any relationship would be only in the context of what kinds of engagements do we have with that country. So either we can start by simply looking at the nature of that relationship by understanding any nomenclature which is used. So we said it is a special and privileged strategic partnership. And then when we say this, we say that there are pillars of this relationship. So what are the pillars of this relationship? So one is historically we can look this relationship or view this relationship to be significant. And that is the relationship during the Cold War period in which gradually Russia emerged or USSR emerged as a trusted partner for India. Strategic partner, defense partner, economic partner, and science and technology partner. And then we started understanding that that has been the trend. So Russia is a traditional partner also, which in the new context is defined as a strategic partner. So when we look at this relationship, we find that this relationship truly deserves this nomenclature because we have extensive diplomatic and political engagements with Russia. For example, the summit or the 2+2 dialogue, but also interactions at different forums. Then we understood that there are certain important areas which we can call drivers of the relationship. What is it that has most intense form of cooperation? So we saw that it is the area of defense, which has been a traditional driver of this relationship. So we developed a very simple understanding that we can refer to defense relations as simply long-standing and wide-ranging. Long-standing in terms of history and wide-ranging in terms of kinds of activities which are involved. For example, if we talk about the weapons exchange which takes place between India and Russia, we can see that it has all the examples, for example, of licensed production, the platforms that India produces on the basis of a license agreement with Russia, meaning the IPR is still with Russia, but we have the license for producing them. We acquired them and we are producing them. So it has helped in some sense developing our own defense manufacturing capabilities. Then we have examples of joint ventures where there is a closer partnership, 50-50 partnership in terms of research and development, design, manufacturing. So that is the example of BrahMos. And then we saw that in terms of portfolio, meaning what we want to buy from Russia, then again that is large, right? So we saw that, for example, the most talked about thing is the S-400 Triumph air defense system, which we are currently buying from Russia with a cost of around $5 billion US, right? But then there is an extensive list. And then we say that traditionally this relationship has been based on buyer-seller equations. The future of this relationship is more towards helping India or Russia helping India in developing defense indigenization. Joint manufacturing is the future. So that's why we said that even in the current portfolio, we have examples like AK-203, which would be manufactured in India based on Russian technology, and then a joint venture has been created. So we understand that this is the direction that we need to take if we have to sustain this relationship. It cannot any longer remain a relationship of buyer and seller, given the orientation of India is changing. It would like to indigenize. We also see that defense relations also translate into exchanges between the armed forces. So Indra series of exercises, from Air Force to Army to Navy to now tri-services exercise. So that is also the case in India-Russia relations. And then we saw that economy is a lesser talked about area, but therein lie certain fundamentals. Specifically, if you look at the fact that we have always wanted to expand our trade, so that this relationship does not remain a one issue relationship, and that is defense. So thereby the target is $30 billion US. We have reached this year $11 billion US in the first half of the year, meaning this year the trade has been relatively better. Last year our trade was around, anyone? लिखा था कलम ने 31 13 billion US dollars. So that gives you a sense that the trade has been limited, and that's why it has been a focus. And this year increase in trade is precisely because of the changed circumstances, global supply chains, the way they have changed. And it has opened up newer opportunities, but it cannot be sustained. Any special year cannot mean that now trade is on an upward trajectory. We have to sustain it. So how do we sustain it? By addressing the issues which have limited the trade. So first of all, we saw that trade is limited. For example, this year the trade is dominated by petroleum and fertilizers. And that is generally the case. Petroleum, fertilizers, raw materials, these dominate the trade. So diversification of trade basket can be one area. But that can only happen if we have other arrangements which intensify trade. So for example, we said that India and Russia, for precise purpose, have started an India-Russia strategic economic dialogue, if you would remember. All right, India-Russia strategic economic dialogue has started. So we are exploring how to improve this trade. And then we said that there are certain mechanisms that they have been talking about. For example, establishment of a green corridor, which is a customs corridor, which simply means that goods identified under this corridor to be traded under this corridor undergo least amount of customs inspection, because we develop common standards. So that expedites trade, reduces the time taken for trade, and that's why cost of trade. And that's one way of improving trade. Second, we said that our trade may benefit by working on free trade arrangements. So not directly with Russia, but we are interested in a free trade arrangement with a grouping of which Russia is a member, called the Eurasian Economic Union. Free trade agreement with Eurasian Economic Union. And then we said that there is another idea that these countries have been talking about, and now it has become relevant. That is exploring the possibility of trade in local currencies, meaning in simple terms, rupee-ruble trade. That has been an idea which was adopted during the time of USSR. It dwindled after Russia emerged as the successor of USSR, and now that has again emerged as a viable option. So that is something that we are doing. For example, in petroleum trade only right now, by allowing correspondent banks to open Vostro account, right? So an Indian bank holding a rupee account for its Russian counterpart in India, and a Russian bank holding a ruble account on behalf of its counterpart from India. All right. So then this is another way in which trade can improve. And remember, now we are increasingly thinking about trade in local currencies. So this is a trend which has started. This is a trend which would consolidate in other relations also. At least there would be discussions of moving away from dollar-based trade, but it is not going to happen anytime soon. So these are indications that this is required, this would happen. And then we said connectivity is a big bottleneck, that it's a long way from India to Russia when we export or import. So that means that we generally have a larger cost of trade because of the distance. So we have been working on shorter trade routes. For example, the INSTC, International North-South Transport Corridor, a corridor connecting India's west coastal ports to Iran, and via Caspian Sea then reaching to the Russian market. That's what we are doing. And then we move towards investments, if you would remember. So we said that if we look at the picture here, the engagements have been stronger, vital. So we said we had a target of 25 billion US dollars of 30 billion US dollars of investments, 15 billion dollars each. We achieved it before time in 2017 itself. So now the target is 50 billion US dollars of investment, 25 billion US dollars each. And if you look at closely these investments, India's investments primarily are concentrated in the energy sector of Russia in the Far East. Either we have bought stakes in oil and gas fields such as Sakhalin, or we are involved in traditional areas of energy. For example, Tata's investment in thermal power plant in Russia's Far East. So Indian companies generally have been interested in diversifying their sources of petroleum supply from the perspective of our long-term interest, and Russia was largely an untapped market. So that is one. And then we link it to the idea of energy cooperation. So we said that India and Russia aim to have an energy bridge, meaning they plan to have a wider energy cooperation in which hydrocarbons is one part, nuclear energy is another part, and the third part is the renewables. All right. And then this gives us an idea why India is keen on defending its interest in this particular context, because it's not verbal commitment or possibilities. It has certain concrete element. We are already investing in Russia. We looked at Russia from the perspective of an energy supplier of the future. And then we looked at the area of technology. So we can understand, if we go in history, that many of the industrial establishments in India, for example, the Navali Lignite Limited, or now if Hyderabad and surroundings of it are important in pharmaceutical manufacturing, or Rishikesh antibiotics manufacturing, or Dehradun Petroleum Research Institute, or even IITs like Bombay, they came up in cooperation with Russia. So if you look at today's technology cooperation, one area becomes obvious, that is nuclear technology cooperation. India-Russia Civil Nuclear Cooperation of 2009, whereby we have been able to establish with Russian help the Kudna-Kulam power plant. So that's the most successful example of civil nuclear cooperation among all the countries that India has. And then we see that there is another area in which prospectively we can benefit is space cooperation. So again, that has a history, either in terms of launch of India's first satellite on a Russian vehicle, or the travel to space by India's first cosmonaut, Rakesh Sharma. But currently what we are interested in are two areas. One, assistance in cooperation in manned space flight that India is planning, that is Gaganyaan, and Russia has extensive experience in that area. And second is the navigation systems that we are developing. So we said that arrangements are there to cooperate in the area of Navik and GLaNOS, all right, which is Russian navigation system. So we can benefit in terms of reach in Russia. Russia can benefit in terms of reach in the Indian Ocean. So that's basically another way in which we can understand the importance of this relationship. And then we move forward and we said that there is something called geostrategic orientation, which gives us an indication of how India-Russia relations would remain friendly. In all likelihood, they should remain friendly. But there may also be differences, meaning we have differences with our friends also, right? It's obvious. No two countries have us very same interests. So in some areas we differ. So where do we differ? So we started talking about some areas of geography which are important in this context. So we say, if you look at the area of Arctic, we can look at it as one area in which India and Russia have been negotiating, talking about future cooperation. And India's interest in the Arctic is threefold, not only from Russia's perspective, but generally. One is environmental and scientific interest. Another is the interest in the area of the untapped mineral reserves of Arctic, if it opens up, economic interest. And third is the interest in terms of the prospects of an Arctic trade route opening. All right. So in all these areas, Russia can be a potential partner for us because it has a large Arctic shelf. But we also understand that this opportunity is not automatic. It is not going to translate automatically into reality because one, we are far away from the Arctic. Two, China is also interested in the Arctic. It defines itself as a near Arctic country and has plans like Polar Silk Road, wherein it wants to invest across the Arctic shelf, especially in the Russian coast, on the European coast, in ports and other logistics. So then China already has a lead, and then increasingly China-Russia relations are getting closer. So there the dice is not exactly in our favor automatically, meaning both possibilities are there. We may end up being close partners in the Arctic, or we may miss out due to Russia's closer relations with China. All right. And then we said Eurasia, this large landmass that we are talking about, Russia as a Eurasian country. So we say that traditionally we view Eurasia as one region where we have a fundamental difficulty, and that is lack of geographical reach, right? Most of Eurasia is landlocked, right? Eurasia, landmass extending between Europe and Russia. So we don't have either traditional orientation towards that region or a direct access to that region, meaning we don't have boundaries with that region. So thereby, if our interests are expanding in that direction, meaning interest in Europe, interest in Russia, interest in Central Asia, So we can see Russia as a prospective partner, Russia being the largest Eurasian country. So we think that we may benefit, or traditionally we have seen Russia as the linchpin of our Eurasian approach. But what Russia is doing right now is not only weakening it, but also creating a newer polarization in Eurasia. Meaning Russia's actions have already alienated Ukraine, and it has given a wrong signal to its other smaller neighbors like Kazakhstan. All right. So that may mean that, again, for example, in Kazakhstan, China may have a better opportunity. It may push Kazakhstan to look at China as a closer partner, right? And then many regional conflicts in Eurasia have a Russia linkage. So that is one difficulty that we are facing right now. That's why people are writing that India needs to look beyond Russia when it comes to Eurasia, all right? Because Russia itself may have fallen in problems. And then specifically when we talk about Central Asia, again we think that since Central Asia is the largest neighbor, since Russia is the largest neighbor of Central Asian countries, Russia may be helpful there because we don't have a direct physical reach there. But again, what we see is what Russia is doing is a threat to Central Asian countries also. They may also be rethinking about their future. And remember, when we say these things, we are only talking about the possibilities. Kya ho sakta hai? That is the only thing that we are saying. So thereby, again, our traditional calculus, either in Arctic or in Eurasia or even in Central Asia, which has relied on future prospects of partnership with Russia, may require a relook, may require a review. That's the only thing that we are saying. All right, we don't know what would happen in the future, but certain indications are there. And then we said that Indo-Pacific, that's the most obvious example where the differences are real. So India is keen on developing cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. India has adopted the Indo-Pacific framework. Russia views Indo-Pacific as a tool of US foreign policy. So meaning Russia views Indo-Pacific from its US prism, right? So there our divergence is, as we say, not directed at each other, but it is part of our foreign policy orientation, which is responding to an uncertain world. Russia is responding to it in its own way. We are responding to it in our own way. So the good thing is that we are not enemy in any sense, adversaries in any sense. But the indication is, remember, it is not human beings, whether you are good or bad. It is the circumstances. Circumstances actually test whether you are good or bad. So circumstances are very important. So circumstances are such that globally there is a polarization which is developing, meaning again the old fault lines, geopolitical fault lines of East and West are re-emerging, wherein one pole clearly is US and US-led West. Another pole now seems to be Russia and China because of commonality of views on so many issues. So even though Russia and China may have differences, right now what is common between them is increasing. So then again, Russia and China have a common view on the Indo-Pacific. And India has a view closer to the US, even though India says inclusive Indo-Pacific, precisely because India does not want to antagonize a traditional partner like Russia or even for that matter, China. All right. So how long can we balance this? How long can we think that our stance of inclusive Indo-Pacific would work where this polarization is developing? So what is challenging us to change is increasing global polarization rather than a direct tension with Russia. So ultimately it would all boil down to one thing. How much beneficial is this relationship as compared to the cost that we would have to pay? All right. And that does not mean the relationship is going to break. That only means that now there is an element of caution in this relationship, right? So that means that अगर दीवार में एक छोटा सा crack है, so that crack may lead to a larger crack and the building, the edifice may collapse, right? That's the only thing that we are saying, that the future of this relationship depends on a lot of ifs, a lot of factors which are still in the future, but we have some directions where our differences may increase, wherein earlier the case has been we have had differences, but our similarities were more, our commonalities, convergence was more. Now we are looking at a future in which our divergences may increase. So then the question only is, how do we manage this relationship? The question is not whether we choose Russia or whether we choose anyone else. The question is, how do we manage this relationship in this particular context? So that's why yesterday somebody had asked what should be our position on this particular issue, specifically what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Or somebody had asked other questions also, I will answer them. But remember, how are relations between Mongolia and China? Do a simple Google search, Mohanji, you will find the answer. Mongolia and China. We are not talking about Mongolia and China. You are interested, you find it out. Right. So what we are saying is that how do we manage this relationship, right? All this boils down to only one question. How do we manage? How do we manage this situation? So one question that yesterday somebody had asked was, what is vertical escalation and what is horizontal escalation? And I understand this is coming because there is a lot of coverage on Russia. So if you see, I have told you that use dictionary. If you look at dictionary, escalation means what? Escalation means increasing effort, number, intensity or scope. All right. So intensification of any effort. So that is a simple meaning of escalation. When we use it in terms of war, when we say there is horizontal escalation, the meaning is very simple. We are escalating our efforts horizontally, and that is easily understood in the context of geography. All right. So maybe a conflict starts on a particular point of border in a particular territory, but when the conflict escalates to a larger geography, we can say that that is horizontal escalation, meaning expansion of the theater area of conflict. So that is one way a country can think of how it would manage its war. All right. So for example, Russia started at a particular point in time, but then it had different ways of moving into Ukraine. And after that, one picture is very clear that Russia has created a eastern band between itself and Ukraine. So Russia's efforts escalated across the geography. So when you escalate across the geography, what it means is that you are actually trying to expand the efforts of your enemy also. So it can cause confusion in the enemy, it can cause deployment of more resources, right? So for example, in India-Pakistan war, you would see the war may start in Kutch, but ultimately the battlegrounds are opened in, let's say, on the Rajasthan border, in the Punjab border, in Jammu and Kashmir also. So that's horizontal escalation. It can have different purposes, right? And then vertical escalation. So basically that is intensification of effort. So you are not necessarily thinking of spreading out your effort. What you are thinking is intensification of your effort. And how can that be done? Either by use of technology. All right. So suppose you first started fighting with sticks. है ना? पहले लठ लेके लड़ाई की. Then you added stones to it. Now you have projectiles. All right. Then you started using fire. So that is another level of intensification. Right? और वो TV series वगैरह में दिखाता है कि now you use bow and arrow using fire. So that is another level of intensification. So you can start with traditional weapons. You can start with any level of formation, brigade level formation, and you can start thinking of going above that, right? So vertical escalation would mean intensification of your effort in terms of the input that you are using. So in case of Russia-Ukraine crisis, the most extreme extent of vertical escalation that we are right now looking at is the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons, because there is nothing beyond nuclear weapons that you can go. So in other words, you can understand that when we talk about horizontal escalation, we are talking about the wall of China. All right. If you know, wall of China was a defensive wall created by different Chinese empires. So you are spreading your efforts across the Chinese wall. And when we are talking about vertical escalation, we are talking about climbing a ladder. है ना? पहले हम सीढ़ी के पहले स्टेप पे हैं, फिर दूसरे स्टेप पे हैं, फिर तीसरे स्टेप पे हैं. So this is vertical escalation. You are climbing the ladder, right? You are taking your efforts to the heights, and that can mean simply starting with simple weapon systems or simple formation to going to complex and extreme options, right? So nuclear weapons is the extreme of vertical escalation when you start saying that we will use nuclear weapons. So that is, you are signaling that we are ready to take the escalation a notch above. One example, for example, when we said that with Pakistan, we are willing to cross the LOC and we are willing to use the Air Force, we are basically escalating it. We are climbing the escalatory ladder, right? So escalation is the easiest thing that armies know. But escalation cannot be controlled. That's the problem. De-escalation would always be a problem. How do you de-escalate? Once you, for example, once you have reused nuclear weapons, so that is the extreme that you have caused. And then how do you then de-escalate? So that is always the problem. Escalation is fine, de-escalation, right? So it is said that, for example, it is argued by some scholars that India and Pakistan know how to escalate, but not how to de-escalate. Meaning, just as in the story of Mahabharata, Abhimanyu knew how to enter the Chakravyuh, but he didn't know how to come out of the Chakravyuh. So escalation simply can mean increasing the number, increasing the intensity, increasing the scope of your war efforts. All right, and it would, depending on the circumstances, it would result in different kinds of examples. Can Russia be one-way bridge India-China relation? Ningthem has asked this question. Can Russia be one-way bridge to India-China relations? Well, that is what we are going to answer. So let's do a bit of writing, all right, as part of the last thing that we are doing in India-Russia relations. Apart from the fact, if you have any questions, we can talk about it, right? So the question simply is managing India-Russia relations in the changing circumstances. And we are saying changing, meaning we are only sure of one thing, that things are changing. We are not sure exactly how they have changed. And that is what you will find. Even if you watch this speech of Dr. Jaishankar, he would be saying that the world is changing. The world is in flux. The world is becoming complicated. And it can have multiple meanings, right? So when we are looking at the changing world, first of all, we make an assessment of challenges and, let's say, opportunities, right? So you simply need to, in these kinds of scenarios, develop your own frame. How would you define the changing scenario? So you can simply define the changing scenario in terms of it entails both challenges and opportunities. Sometimes it would be easier to see challenges and you will see less of opportunities, and that is the art, right? Where there are more challenges, can you also find opportunities? So challenges are one. When you look at diplomatic challenges, and we can have a simple basis of looking at what we call challenges, right? A simple basis. So when we say, let's say, diplomatic challenges, so what is happening? What is happening is this: greater polarization is leading to difficulty of choices. What is happening? Greater polarization is leading to difficulty of choices. No brainer, right? If the world is not asking you whose side you are on, your life is easy. But if every day you have to answer the question whose side you are on, your life is difficult. All right? Because every day you have to make a choice. So there is a story. In the Zen tradition, there is a story. I heard it from somebody called Alan Watts. So he said there was a farmer. And the farmer one day found a worker. And that worker was very good. So he was put to the task of putting a fence, and he completed the task in half a day. Then the farmer gave the worker another task. And then he also completed that task in the given time. And then some time was left. So he was given another task. So he completed that also. So the farmer found that what any worker would have done in 3 days, this worker has done in 1 day. So the farmer said that, wait, you work for me, all right? I'll give you employment, you work for me, you don't have to work on day-to-day basis, I'm employing you. So the worker said yes. But the problem is the farmer has to give the worker something to do. So then farmer gave the worker the next day the task of sorting the potato yield, all right? So the worker had to sort the potatoes. So 3 categories of potatoes. One, the good quality one which would go to the market. Another which is good quality but maybe small in size, so that would be for domestic consumption. And another rotten potatoes which the worker has to throw, all right? And then the worker set out for the task, and then after 1 hour worker comes to the farmer and says, I'm not doing this, I'm not going to work anymore, I'm going. So the farmer asked why. He said, what kind of task is this? It involves decisions after decisions after decisions, meaning after every potato I have to take a decision, whether there is a good potato, bad potato, what is the size, rotten potato, yahan rakhna hai, wahan rakhna hai, kahan rakhna hai. So that excellent worker was also burdened by choice, right? In life also, decision making, if you have to focus on a lot of things, decision making becomes difficult because you would develop a decision fatigue, right? So we are not saying that it would happen here, but we are simply saying that polarization in global politics is leading to difficult choices, all right? And then what is the military challenge that we have? What is the military challenge that we have? The military challenge can be immediate. For example, strain on continued military procurement from Russia, all right? Strain on continued military procurement from Russia. That is also a no-brainer. A country which has not till so far back has provided for 60% of our defense supplies. Now when we face supply bottlenecks in terms of maintaining this engagement, that would be a big challenge that we are facing. Even though we are not involved in war, even though we are not there in Ukraine, we are no party, neither west nor east. But this, what is happening, the changing circumstances are putting a strain on continued military procurement from Russia. And there may be economic challenges. What kind of economic challenges? Very simple economic challenges. Any conflict where if it breaks out in some important region, what happens is it immediately sends a negative signal to the market. So the result is generally twofold. One, either there would be an escalation in prices of certain important commodities, or the financial markets would respond adversely. All right. So generally कहीं भी conflict होगा, generally यही होता है. Conflict हो गया, अगले दिन market tank हो जाएगा, नीचे चला जाएगा, right? Share market. अब ऐसा क्यों होता है? इसका कोई scientific explanation नहीं. Sentiments कहते हैं, market sentiments, right? Market is not feeling well, right? As though market is an individual. But the other thing is the rising supply constraints, or let's say escalation of prices. So what we are saying is, first, recognize that what is happening in the world where Russia is an important player is actually causing us some difficulties. Some difficult choices have to be made. Some adjustments have to be made, and that is where you will start understanding what should be India's position. India's first position should always be to minimize the challenges. And that's why you must have heard two things that Dr. Jaishankar prominently says. Once he says India stands on its own side. What does it mean? It simply means that we have to calculate our own interests. We are not the judge there. So we stand on our own side. And second thing that Dr. Jaishankar says, that India stands on the side of peace. Right? India stands on the side of peace. So the challenge always is, how do we defend our interest even while defending our principles? All right. So these are the immediate challenges that India would need to manage. But are there any opportunities? Are there any opportunities that we may have? So let's now bring those things that people talk either in terms of, तो कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि केवल इंडिया के पास सोल्यूशन है जी, देखो ज़ेलेंस्की साहब बात कर रहे हैं, पुतिन साहब बात कर रहे हैं, तो इंडिया ही सॉल्यूशन दे सकता है. तो एक तो वो तरीका हो गया उसका, वेरी नाइव वे ऑफ सेइंग नो कंट्री हैज अ सॉल्यूशन ऑन दीज काइंड्स ऑफ इश्यूज, लेस सो इंडिया. All right, but still when we go to UN we say that look, what is India's position? India is talking to Ukraine, so we thanked Ukraine that you helped us in evacuating our citizens. We thanked Russia also that you helped us in evacuating our citizens. So what is it that it is allowing us to do? It, in certain sense, what we are trying to do is we are trying to maintain a safe distance from the conflict. All right. So that gives us a diplomatic opportunity to become peace makers. So that's one opportunity that is there. For example, the Mexican president perhaps said that the UN should form a committee, right? UN should form a committee to seek peace between Russia and Ukraine. And then he said that certain world leaders should be involved. And he said that Prime Minister Modi should also be involved there. India should also be involved there. And generally this is nothing new. UN does it. UN creates committees. All right. Committee on Palestine, so on and so forth. Committee on Syria. It appoints political representatives to bring peace in difficult situation. So it is an opportunity to become peacemaker. All right. That simply means using the platforms like UN or SCO or any other platform to be a peacemaker. So India should try and see how this conflict, and no conflict lasts forever. ये भी ओवर हो जाएगा, फिर हमारी मेमोरी का साइकिल बहुत ही फिकल है, छोटा है, फिर हमको कोई नई चीज अट्रैक्ट करने लगेगी. All right, but then this would go in history books and this would become a reference point कि आपने क्या किया था. So we should make an effort to utilize this opportunity which is there for bringing in peace. All right. Then are there any military opportunities which are there? Are there any military opportunities which are there? So we can think of some military opportunity. What is the military opportunity? So opportunities in these situations don't actually look like opportunities. All right. They are always masked by challenges. So for example, of first decade of 21st century, what happened? India and United States started talking about developing a strategic partnership. All right. But they didn't have the experience of working with each other. India would always say no. And US would not understand. है ना? जैसे US said that India's non-alignment is immoral. India said, who are you to tell us our non-alignment is immoral? It is a merit-based policy. Right? So that these are the kind of countries we are. But there was one question on which we found some opportunity. And there is always a give and take. What was that one question? US wanted to isolate Iran. And India always wants good relations with Iran. All right? Just as India wants good relations with most of the countries. So India wants good relations with Iran. So then one way of US wanting to isolate Iran was curtailing Iran's ability to sell its oil in the global market. All right? Okay. So then India would say, why should we curtail our oil supplies from Iran? We are a developing country. We need energy. India की जरूरत आज जो है वो कल भी वही थी. All right? It does not change overnight. So then what happened? We signed a civil nuclear deal with the US. And how was the civil nuclear deal sold in the US to the lawmakers of US? So those who were involved in this deal making said that, look, India as a developing country requires energy options. And it requires energy options which are clean. So for tackling global warming, global emissions, country like India needs energy options. Right? So let's give it a nuclear deal. And then an underlying idea was that this would also enable India to wean itself away from petroleum, which means petroleum coming from a country like Iran also. All right. So it depends whether you are able to see opportunity in a challenge or not. And that is the art of diplomacy. That is the art of diplomacy. So here also the chances are strengthening domestic defense manufacturing. How? How can we say this? One, we can imagine that Russia needs international support more at this point in time. So here is a time to press for certain issues which have been negotiated for long. How would we transcend the buyer-seller relationship and move towards joint manufacturing? All right, if that happens with Russia, well, it's a win-win scenario for us. That means negotiating technology transfer in some certain important areas. If that does not happen, then we have another opportunity. Negotiating with the US, with the West. Why should we come with you on the issue of Russia? Why should we do some give and take on the issue of Russia? What are you offering us? So that is another opportunity. Why? भाई पोलराइजेशन हम तो किया नहीं है, पोलराइजेशन आपने किया है, नुकसान हम उठाएंगे. तो हर देश ट्राई करेगा कि जब दो बड़े लोग लड़ रहे हो तो दोनों से फायदा मिले. So this is an opportunity for strengthening domestic defense manufacturing, either by partnering or negotiating with Russia. The idea of partnership in defense indigenization, or by negotiating with US. What? US and West, what? Either some of the technologies that they have not been willing to give us. All right. The problem with US is that first of all, its supplies come with a lot of conditionalities. इसको नहीं दे सकते, उसको नहीं दे सकते, इसलिए यूज नहीं कर सकते, inspection होना चाहिए, and they are expensive. So here is an opportunity to strike a bargain. That's what we are saying, very simply. All right. So with Russia, we can move in the direction. We can make efforts by explaining it. The point. Look, because of your actions, और ये हम public में नहीं कहेंगे ना, ये तो हम personally कहेंगे कि look, because of your actions, we are facing so many difficulties. All right. So it would be better. You would also benefit if your companies invest in India and there is a joint venture which is created, or there is technology transfer which happens. All right. And USA, look, you want us to break our relations with Russia. That is what US always wants, that India should send troops to Afghanistan. India should not buy oil from Iran. All right. India should not buy weapons from Russia. So if you have the gall to say this to us, कि इससे मत खरीदो, उससे मत खरीदो, उससे मत खरीदो, उससे मत खरीदो, so then you must tell us what exactly are you offering. All right. So that is where we turn this into an opportunity. Why? As I said, conflict would be over. And conflict is there. And the difficulties are very obvious. But the opportunities are also there. The times of crisis are the times of opportunity also. So negotiating new weapons deals with the US, or we can also think of making it clear to the US that you cannot continue supplying defense equipments to Pakistan. Something. 4 डिमांड रखो, 4 में से आपको पता होना चाहिए कौन सी एक डिमांड पे आप मान जाओगे. ऑल राइट. तो 4 में से एक डिमांड अगर किसी ने मान ली तो भी विन विन है, क्योंकि पहले तो कुछ नहीं मिल रहा था, 4 में से एक मिल गया. 4 में से 3 डिमांड रिजेक्ट कर दी, आपकी मेन डिमांड मान ली तो वो ऑप्टिमल सॉल्यूशन है. 4 में से 4 मान ली तो वो चांस है. ऑल राइट. सो दैट इज व्हाट वी आर सेइंग, दैट इज व्हाट वी नीड टू डू. कभी भी हाथ में हाथ रखे बैठे हुए चांस नहीं आएगा. अब इकोनॉमिक चैलेंजेस हैं. So, but there are economic opportunities, and economic opportunities are obvious. For example, cheaper oil from Russia. Cheaper oil from Russia. All right. So that's an opportunity. We have been saying this, क्यों हम ये कहते रहते हैं कि Europe buys in one afternoon from Russia what we buy in 1 year? We are saying that look, when you talk about principles, you forget that you are a developed economy and we are a developing economy. और फ्री में प्रिंसिपल्स की बात नहीं होती है, ऑलराइट? फ्री में प्रिंसिपल्स की बात नहीं होती कि आपका जब मन करे तो आप कहें कि आप ये पोजीशन ले लो. सो वी आर डूइंग अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स, दैट्स व्हाई वी आर मेकिंग अ लॉट ऑफ पब्लिक स्टेटमेंट्स, है ना? सो चीपर ऑयल फ्रॉम रशिया, क्योंकि हमको तो खरीदना है ऑयल फ्रॉम रशिया. व्हाई? अदरवाइज यू मेक अस अवेलेबल चीपर ऑयल. US ensures that we have a cheaper oil supply, right? So that is one opportunity which is there, which came. It's an obvious example. It came. Russia offered us discounted oils. ऐसे कोई ऑफर नहीं करता आपको discounted oil. Russia offered us discounted oil because it needed buyers. All right? It is not doing us any favor. रशिया की वही commodity है जो रशिया बेच सकता है. So in both senses. So cheaper oil from Russia. That's one option. Another option is global food supply. So Russia-Ukraine war ने क्या किया? It blocked supply of, let's say, commodities like wheat to the global market. So sometimes disruptions also cause opportunities. So then that is one opportunity that arose for India. That's why you would have seen news like Turkey rejecting India's wheat. So that made news. But you can also read that this is precisely because opportunities arose for India to supply food grains to the global markets. And that's a real shortage. All right. Either providing food grains to World Food Program or providing food grains on commercial rates or concessional rates, whatever. हमारे पास एक चीज तो है ना, we have a large reserve of public food stock होल्डिंग. एमएसपी पे खरीदते हैं, वो फिर क्या करते हैं, उसको एफएसआई के गोडाउन में स्टोर कर देते हैं. फिर क्या होता है, वो सड़ जाता है. फिर सुप्रीम कोर्ट कहता है कि ऐसा कैसे हो गया, दिस इज क्रिमिनल वेस्ट. सो वो स्टोर से कुछ निकाल के बेचने का मौका मिला हमको. सो दैट इज बेसिकली अनदर वे इन विच वी कैन लुक एट इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज. एंड देन इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज इन टर्म्स ऑफ, और ये बहुत ही लॉन्ग शॉट है, this is not an obvious option. Diversification of trade currency basket. Meaning we generally trade in dollar, that because that is what the preference of the world is. But how long? Right? The currency's credibility relies only on one important fact, that is trust. All right? वरना करेंसी क्या है? It's a piece of paper with no inherent value. So one way in which the US dollar became global currency is because of the stability ensured by the United States. But in every conflict, United States issues certain kinds of sanctions. One sanction is on the use of dollar in transaction with countries that it is targeting. And it gives US disproportionate power because the countries of the world use dollar and dollar actually is a US currency. So अपनी national currency को regulate करने का right तो हर देश के पास है. All right. So that is basically what is happening. The more this happens, the more countries would move towards a new payment system. All right. A new mechanism of trade payments. So that is another opportunity that we should be working on. All right. Just as we say now and we justly proud ourselves on digitization of financial payments, right? So ये हमने domestically किया. Now there is a global opportunity. Different countries are developing different payment options. Different countries are negotiating ways of paying in local currency. This may become a trend, this may not become a trend, but this is visible that this is what is happening, right? Every few years, US would have a sanction on one country, right? And then it would create difficulties, for example, in investing in Iran, all right, or expanding Chabahar, or expanding the Zahedan railway, or buying oil from Iran, or buying oil from Russia. तो ये conditionalities के साथ कब तक रह सकते हैं? So what these points are, they are primarily core national interests. So first, way of managing is recognizing the challenges, minimizing the scope of the challenges, and we can do that by looking at the opportunities, and this requires a deft act. यानी कि ऐसा नहीं है कि हमको कोई एक ही चीज करनी है, पीस की बात भी करनी है और इंटरेस्ट की बात भी करनी है, and that is what we are doing. All right, that is what we are doing in the context of Russia. So that is something that we clearly need to manage, thereby in specific relation to Russia. Right, this is the global situation in which Russia is involved. Now in specific context of Russia, what is it that we can do? So first of all, simple solutions: enhancing engagements. In normal times also, that's the idea, enhancing engagements. What kinds of engagements? First of all, intensification of bilateral engagements. More number of dialogues would be required. So enhancing bilateral engagements. Why? Because if you want to convey any message to your friend, you do it through bilateral mechanisms. You don't do messaging on multilateral platforms. Public में आप बात नहीं करते, आप bilateral platforms पे बात करते हैं if you want to convey any important message. So bilateral engagements have to intensify. Then what other kinds of engagements? So we can think of other forms of engagements. For example, engagements, एक simple idea है SCO, RIC. So they become an alternative platform for us. All right. But then there can be another idea. For example, can India be, what was the question? Can something or can Russia be a one-way bridge? Something was the question. So bridge बनने का option भी हमारे पास. All right. Act as a bridge, meaning just as there is RIC, which was proposed by Russia in 1998. What prevents us from proposing a dialogue like this? इंडिया, यूएसए, रशिया. इसको कुछ अच्छा सा नाम भी दे सकते हैं, यूरी. रशियन नाम भी लग रहा है. उरी भी कह सकते हैं, यूरी भी कह सकते हैं. ऑल राइट. सो बेसिकली ट्राइलैटरल डायलॉग इन्वॉल्विंग टू ऑफ आर इंपॉर्टेंट पार्टनर्स. उनको बिठा करके टेबल पे समझाना कि देखो झगड़ा मत करो, इससे हमारा नुकसान होता है. राइट. So this is simply the possibility, because we already have something that exists, making an effort for a trilateral dialogue involving Russia and United States, just as there is Russia, India, China trilateral dialogue. All right, so that's another way of enhancing engagement. अब हमें मुश्किल आ रही है कहां से? तीसरे रिलेशनशिप से. All right, उसको मिनिमाइज करना है हमको. मिनिमाइज करने का तरीका क्या होता है? So for example, जिसके बारे में सबसे ज्यादा लोग बात करते हैं, for example, we are buying S-400 system from Russia, right? So रशिया आ गया इक्वेशन में. अब यहां पे यूएस कहता है कि मत खरीदो, और यूएस ने एक कानून बना दिया, काटसा. ऑल राइट. तो हमको ये S-400 भी खरीदना है और हमको काटसा का सैंक्शन भी अवॉइड करना है. राइट. सो अभी वो तलवार लटकी हुई है. पीपल आर सेइंग दैट रशिया, यूएस इज कंसिडरिंग गिविंग इंडिया अ वेवर. वो ट्रंप ने भी नहीं दिया. प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ऑल्सो डिड नॉट मेक अ डिसीजन ऑन दैट. प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन इज ऑल्सो नॉट मेकिंग अ डिसीजन ऑन दैट. राइट. सो वी से दैट वी आर स्पेशल रिलेशन, सो वी विल गेट अ वेवर. बट जब तक वो वेवर साइन नहीं हो जाता तब तक उसकी कोई वैल्यू नहीं है. सो वी वुड नीड टू मेक efforts. So what is CAATSA? CAATSA is a US legislation which US enacted in 2018. It is countering American adversaries through Sanctions Act. Right? CAATSA का मतलब है एक अमेरिका का कानून. इसका नाम है काउंटरिंग अमेरिकन एडवर्सरीज थ्रू सैंक्शंस. कैसे मुकाबला करें अमेरिका के दुश्मनों का? सैंक्शंस लगा के. ऑलराइट. सो अमेरिका इस तरह के बहुत सारे कानून बनाता रहता है. लोग पूछते हैं कि अमेरिका ने ताइवान पे कैसे कानून बना दिया. भाई वो उनकी पार्लियामेंट है, उनका लेजिस्लेचर है, उनका मन किया कानून बनाने का, बना दिया. उनको लगता है कि ये कानून इफेक्टिव हो सकता है इसलिए बना दिया. हम भी बना सकते हैं कानून. क्वेश्चन इज वुड एनीवन और वुड वी बी एबल टू इंप्लीमेंट दैट? डू वी वांट टू डू दैट? ये नेचर ऑफ अमेरिकन पॉलिटिक्स है. सो काटसा बेसिकली टारगेटिंग 3 कंट्रीज. कुछ देशों से यूएस को विशेष प्यार है, ईरान, नॉर्थ कोरिया एंड रशिया, राइट? सो दैट इज सिंपली अ वे, जैसे हुक्का पानी बंद कर देते हैं गांव में. सो रशिया कह रहा है कि मैं गांव का चौधरी हूं, और जो ये ईरान और नॉर्थ कोरिया और रशिया हैं, ये जो है हमारी बात नहीं मान रहे, तो क्या करेंगे? इनका सोशल बाइकॉट, हुक्का पानी बंद, बिजनेस बंद इनके साथ. तुम इनके साथ बिजनेस करोगे तो हमारे साथ नहीं कर पाओगे. ऑलराइट, इनसे कुछ खरीदा, जैसे काटसा को कहते हैं कि मेजर न्यू एक्विजिशन, $5 बिलियन का है, तो यूएस कहेगा कि अब ये तो मेजर न्यू एक्विजिशन हो गया, यानी तुमने वायलेट किया है काटसा को रशिया के साथ बिजनेस करके, तो हमारे साथ बिजनेस में तुमको ये नुकसान उठाना पड़ेगा. ऑलराइट, तो अब ये यूएस का कानून है, यूएस का कानून हम पे लागू नहीं होता, लेकिन हमारे इंटरेक्शंस बहुत हैं यूएस के साथ, राइट? लार्ज ट्रेड, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एक्सेट्रा. और यूएस ने अभी सैंक्शंस लगाया है एक इंडियन कंपनी के ऊपर, बिकॉज यूएस सेड दैट इट वाज बाइंग ऑयल, इट वाज एक्टिंग एज अ फ्रंट फॉर ईरानियन ऑयल. यहां से खरीद के, हमारे लोग जुगाड़ू भी बहुत हैं, खरीदते ही होंगे, यहां से खरीद के चाइना को ऑयल बेच रहा है. सो ऐसे ये हम सोचते हैं कि भाई इसरो पे कोई बात ना आ जाए, इसरो के साइंटिस्ट पे कोई बात ना आ जाए, डीआरडीओ पे कोई बात ना आ जाए. जब भी डिफेंस के बारे में हम सोच रहे होते हैं, पर्सनल बैन्स भी हो सकते हैं, ट्रैवल बैन भी हो सकता है, सारी चीजें हो सकती है, तो हम अपने लार्जर इंटरेस्ट को कैलकुलेट करते हैं क्या नुकसान हो सकता है, राइट? तो अब यार चौधरी साहब कह रहे हैं कि हुक्का पानी बंद, और हमारी तो दोस्ती है इनसे, मतलब नॉर्थ कोरिया से भी हमारी ऐसी कोई दुश्मनी नहीं है. वी मेंटेन एन एम्बेसी देयर. सो यूएस हैड पुट प्रेशर ऑन इंडिया टू कट डाउन its diplomatic presence in North Korea. India said that we will not cut down our diplomatic relations with North Korea. What we will do is we will scale down our trade with North Korea. All right? लेकिन हम अपना प्रेजेंस वहां से नहीं हटाएंगे. ये बात है 11, 12, 13 की. ऑल राइट, और ईरान के साथ पहले भी कहा ऑयल मत खरीदो. हमने कहा ऑयल खरीदेंगे, ऑयल का अमाउंट कम कर देंगे. ट्रंप साहब ने कहा कि नहीं, ऑयल कट डाउन इट टू 0. Right? Earlier, US used to say as close to 0. So we kept on buying. Now Trump administration said cut it down to 0. बिल्कुल ऑयल मत खरीदो. तो हमें करना पड़ा, but we don't like it. Right? If we do something, it does not necessarily mean that we like it. अब रशिया, we have a larger stake. ईरान के साथ हम डाउनग्रेड कर सकते हैं रिलेशन, नॉर्थ कोरिया के साथ कह सकते हैं चलो थोड़ा समझौता कर लेंगे आपसे, बट रशिया के साथ करने में बहुत ज्यादा कीमत चुकानी पड़ेगी हमको. All right, it's a costly affair. So one way is कि लड़ लो, another way is कि एक तो इससे बात करो और एक इससे बात करो bilaterally, दोनों के साथ बात करो, because this is part of bilateral relations with both. और दूसरा दोनों के साथ एक साथ बात करो. All right, so that's what we are saying. Act as a bridge wherever possible. For example, think of engagements as trilateral set of dialogue between India, United States and Russia, right? So that is one way of managing relations with Russia. Intensification of engagements, diversification of engagements. Then second thing that we need to do is improving trade and connectivity. इंप्रूविंग ट्रेड एंड कनेक्टिविटी. अब रशिया के साथ पूरी दुनिया ट्रेड नहीं करेगी, तो इसका मतलब क्या, हमारे पास तो अपॉर्चुनिटी है रशिया के मार्केट को एक्सप्लोर करने के लिए, राइट? सो देन इट मीन्स दैट इट स्टिल इज एन अपॉर्चुनिटी विद रशिया. बायलैटरली strengthening relations would always require improving trade and connectivity. And remember, these are options which are not only for peacetime or conflict time. These are options which are widely applicable on both occasions, improving trade and connectivity, right? For example, by operationalization of INSTC, and if possible, mushkil hai, but still we have declared it, Chennai, Vladivostok, Chennai, Vladivostok, route, all right, or energy corridor as we call it. So some किसी ने कल सवाल पूछा था कि चाइना क्या हमको नहीं रोकेगा या ऐसा हो पाएगा क्या. So we are not saying कि ऐसा हो पाएगा. We are only pointing out that we had declared that we will work on this. So there is no harm in including this, that we should work on them. Crisis के time पे जल्दी काम करना पड़ता है. INSTC is yet not operationalized. We keep on hearing about its operationalization. So operationalize INSTC and then work on Chennai Vladivostok corridor, all right, or energy corridor or whatever you would like to call it. So that is a no-brainer. That is one weak area of relation. We should simultaneously look at how we are going to improve the relations in this particular context. And then, as we have said earlier also, in the context of global polarization in world politics involving Russia. So in bilateral relation also, we are saying partnership should move towards joint development and production of defense equipments. This is the time. Meaning, we should make it clear to Russia, or we should try and steer the relation in such a way that Russia becomes a partner in Make in India initiative. All right, we should make it clear to Russia that what we want now is Make in India. And then what we can say is this, that we should think of innovative mechanisms. For example, we can say that India and Russia had held an informal summit in 2018 precisely because the idea was that India and Russia are developing differences on what matter. Russia moving towards China and India moving towards US. So there would always be an opportunity where perceptions would be there that there are differences which are increasing, pressures which are increasing. So for that we need to think of the things that we have done in the past. So mechanisms like informal summit. This is the opportunity when there is more leader to leader interaction, informal meeting. वैसे भी बाइडेन साहब इंडिया नहीं आ रहे हैं. ऑल राइट. सो अगर ये क्वेश्चन है कि यूएस क्या कहेगा, चाइना क्या कहेगा, ये हमको करने देगा कि नहीं देगा. सो इन लाइफ वी ऑलवेज गो बाय द डिक्टम. दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा रोग क्या कहेंगे लोग. सो इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस ऑल्सो क्या कहेंगे लोग इज नॉट द इशू. द इशू इज डिप्लोमेसी इज परमानेंट, relations are long term. So that's why there has to be an attempt to find opportunities in challenges and very clearly identify that there are challenges and there are opportunities also. And once you have identified your challenges, you turn them into opportunities. All right. And while doing so, do two things. Don't let go of principles and don't let go of interests. अब ये सवाल पूछेगी ये कैसे होगा, तो यही तो आर्ट ऑफ डिप्लोमेसी है. भारत सरकार इसीलिए पैसा देती है आईएफएस को. ऑल राइट. दैट्स व्हाई यू हैव द गवर्नमेंट, दैट्स व्हाई यू हैव द कैबिनेट, दैट्स व्हाई यू हैव द थिंक टैंक्स. दैट्स द जॉब ऑफ डिप्लोमेसी. कूटनीति कहते हैं उसको. ऑल राइट. तो अगर सब कुछ ऑब्वियस ही होता तो जरूरत ही नहीं थी, है ना. सब कुछ ऑब्वियस होता तो जरूरत ही नहीं थी. इसलिए तो कंपटीशन लेके लोगों को ला रहे हैं कि इंटेलिजेंट टैलेंटेड लोग आए. So that is what we are saying, that even when it seems difficult, the answers are very obvious. Now let's simply look at अब इसमें अगर मान लो कुछ ऐड करना चाहो, पीपल टू पीपल टाइज कर सकते हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल 200,000 टूरिस्ट फ्रॉम रशिया यूज टू विजिट इंडिया, 100,000 इंडियंस विजिट रशिया. सो वो भी एक एस्पेक्ट है. टूरिज्म बढ़ाओ, पीपल टू पीपल टाइज. गोवा जाइए, गोवा इज अ फेवरेट डेस्टिनेशन फॉर रशियंस. सो जब रशिया आइसोलेट हो रहा है तो हमको ध्यान देने की जरूरत है. रशिया बहुत बड़ा देश है. इट कैन बी आइसोलेटेड बट इट इज नॉट अ नॉर्थ कोरिया. सो दिस इज द टाइम टू प्रिजर्व द फ्रेंडशिप, नॉट बिकॉज देर इज एनीथिंग लाइक नेचुरल फ्रेंडशिप. इट मेक्स सेंस, इट मेक्स सेंस. कोई हमारे लिए अपना रिलेशनशिप सेक्रीफाइस नहीं कर रहा है तो हमको भी करने की जरूरत नहीं. जब तक पॉसिबल है हम ये कोशिश करते रहेंगे. सो इनहैंसिंग people to people ties. And let's say what has dominated this relationship is government to government engagements. So effort should be involving people to people ties and improving business to business ties between these countries, a dialogue between business sectors of these countries. That's the future, right? So that जैसे चाइना पाकिस्तान में सीपीईसी बना रहा है, वैसे कभी हमारी कंपनियां, अडानी साहब ने इतना पैसा कमा लिया, so he should also go and develop in Russia, right? Let's say something like a far east corridor, है ना, व्लादिवोस्टॉक से मॉस्को तक रेल लाइन, व्लादिवोस्टॉक से मॉस्को तक रोड. So Indians must also think on global scale. जब सोचोगे तभी तो करोगे, right? Why कि चाइना ने कर लिया वहां पे, जी हम क्या करें? तो आप भी जाओ, जहां जहां मौका मिल रहा है वहां बनाओ, ऑल राइट. एंड उसके लिए सबसे पहले घर पे बनाओ, इंप्रूव योर कैपेबिलिटीज. चाइना ने पहले घर पे बनाया, इतने शहर बना दिए कि आज देर इज अ रियल एस्टेट क्राइसिस इन चाइना. उतना नहीं करने की जरूरत है, बट हम धीरे 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 एक्सपीरियंस कमाते जाएंगे बड़ा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाने का. तो उसके बाद अगला हमको कहाँ बनाना है? यूरोप में बनाना है. केवल घर पे ही ठेके लेते रह देंगे क्या? यूरोप में लेंगे, रशिया में लेंगे, सेंट्रल एशिया में लेंगे, तभी तो बड़े बनेंगे. सो बिजनेस टू बिजनेस इंटरेक्शन, हमारे बिजनेस को भी सीखना है दुनिया से कैसे डील करना है. ऑल राइट, बिजनेस टू बिजनेस इंटरेक्शन, पीपल टू पीपल टाइज, हमारे लोगों को सीखना है कि दुनिया से कैसे इंटरैक्ट करना है. यानी कि हमको अपनी सारी ताकत लगानी, केवल गवर्नमेंट नहीं, ऑल्सो पीपल, नॉट ओनली पीपल बट ऑल्सो businesses. All right, so that is a no brainer. Matlab, that's a simple idea that you can always think of, right? So what is it that India has done? India in the Ukraine crisis, what do we see that India has done? And now it should be very obvious that India has done two things. And remember this. One is it has tried to uphold certain principles, plus it has tried to uphold its interests. So what should India do? Again, I'm repeating, this is what India should be doing. All right, signing of a bilateral FTA with Russia would not make much sense right now, Sir Ranveer. So that's why that idea I have not included here, if that is the suggestion. So principles plus interest. So what is it that India has done? First, if you would see, India's statements were balancing different interests, right? So India advocated from the beginning, diplomacy and respect for all concerns or concerns of all sides. So meaning India is saying Russia may also have some concern. Meaning Russia was talking about what? Its security. Its security is being threatened by how NATO is moving towards eastwards. So this statement, diplomacy के statement हमेशा ambiguous होते हैं flexibility के लिए. All right. So India said that diplomacy should be the path. And what kind of diplomacy? Involving all sides, all stakeholders, respecting all concerns. Meaning Russia's concerns for security and Ukraine's concerns for territorial integrity and sovereignty. मतलब सबको कुछ ना कुछ मिलना चाहिए. That is what India would always say, right? And then if this is the principle in very simple terms, India took what kinds of steps first? So India, if you would see, when the war began, India evacuated its citizens. Around 22,000 Indian students. एक समय ये भी न्यूज में बहुत चल रहा था. Now you have forgotten. Now the government is saying कि वो जो डॉक्टर आए हैं उनको क्लास स्टॉप्ड. अच्छा, buffering stuck. There is some problem online, so we will stop for a brief while. You can take a break if you want to. till they work on the online connectivity. Okay, we will start now. Those of you who are outside, please come inside and please close the door. And so then we are saying that first India said diplomacy should be the path. Consistently, this is what India is saying. India initially said all concerns should be respected, accommodated. So India is saying that Russia also has legitimate concerns. So these are all acts of signaling. We signal as to where we stand. All right. But if you also notice, then India all the time was also first and primarily interested in some of its vital interests. And what was our vital interest here? In any part of the world, if any conflict breaks out, we have to see, are there any interests of India directly? All right. So, for example, what are our interests directly? If our people are involved, if our investments are there, or if our, let's say, energy resources are coming from that region, these would be India's direct interests. People, investments, energy. All right. So, mainly. So, that's where we found that our citizens, meaning students in large number, were studying in the universities of University of Ukraine, and they study in the University of Russia also. All right. So then we evacuated them through Operation Ganga. That is something that we did. So you must notice what India did to understand India's response, or what should India be doing. India would not be doing anything different from what it is already doing. So there are no new solutions. There is only an observation of what India has been doing. So that is what we did. Then what we did. So we have, India has abstained from both West or US, let's say, US sponsored resolutions. That is something that is very common. Sponsored resolutions, as well as those backed by Russia. All right. So that is what we have done. We have neither voted in favor of resolutions which were critical of Russia, sponsored by the West or US, nor we have voted in favor of resolutions which were backed by Russia or China, which aimed at justifying Russia's actions. We are aware that in a war, it is very difficult to find a moral side. Every country would say that morality is on my side. All right. So that's something that we recognize, and that is something that is recognized in international relations also. That every country would say morality is on my side. I am right. Why am I fighting? Because I am right. And right is a very subjective matter. That's why UPSC asked Ukraine-Russia crisis in one paper. Which paper? Paper 4. All right. UPSC asked a question on Ukraine-Russia crisis, but in paper 4, on the justifications of war, on the morality of war, on the ethical limits of war. That is what UPSC did. कि अपना दिमाग लगाओ, बताओ क्या सही और गलत है. Right. So that was a good question, by the way. It has both a technical answer and it can also test people's moral compass. What is the position that they are prone to taking? Technical answer, जिन्होंने रट लिया वो भी अच्छा आंसर लिख के आएंगे. जिन्होंने अपने दिमाग को लगाया, जनरल एथिकल आंसर लिखा, वो भी अच्छा लिख के लाएंगे. So India abstained from both kinds of resolutions, right? So sometimes newspapers said that India has voted in favor of resolution against Russia. So that was never the case. India voted in favor of one resolution, which was an invitation to President Vladimir Zelensky to address the UNSC. अब वो against or for किसी नहीं है भाई, उसको अधिकार है बोलने का. All right. So that was a very non-substantive issue, right? So but we have never voted in favor or against any of these resolutions. So we are not taking ethically any side, because we are clearly saying that here we can't say that any of the side is in the right, right? And then what you will see, that when we give this kinds of votes, abstain, any abstention is always accompanied by an explanation. All right, when there is an abstention, ऐसा थोड़ी ना कि what does India do? We abstain. No, first India would give 5 minutes of lecture. All right, and that is what we do. शुरुआत से हम यही करते हैं, हमको मौका मिलता है, हम बोलने में, इंडियंस बोलने में बहुत अच्छे हैं. That's why we are called argumentative Indians. हमारे पास arguments अच्छे हैं. All right, for example, a few years back, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin were sitting, and an American journalist was taking an interview. So the questions that were asked to Prime Minister Modi, since it was an American journalist, was of the nature critical of Russia. Then Prime Minister Modi always gave answers which were round, घूमते रहो. And President Putin said, it is very difficult to argue with an Indian. है ना? So we are good at this, ideas. So we explain our votes. Why? क्योंकि हमने एक बार किसी का साथ ले लिया, दे दिया, लाइट चली गई, तो लाइट चले जाने से क्या रिलेशन है? इज दी ऑनलाइन क्लासेस वर्किंग? काम हो रहा है सब कुछ. ऑल राइट, लाइट चली गई तो अब कुछ और तो करने नहीं लेंगे यहाँ पे. So what we are saying is this, that notice India's explanation. What is India saying? First of all, India's explanation have included demands. India's position has been made clear. What is India's position? India says there should be immediate cessation of hostilities, meaning active fighting should stop. Immediate cessation of hostilities. We can say that this may look like a ceasefire. All right, immediate cessation of hostilities called by India. Then India says that international relations must be conducted on the basis of respect for the principles of UN Charter and international law. So that is what we are saying. क्या करना चाहिए भाई? भाई, do anything, but ensure that you abide by the principles of UN Charter and you abide by the principles of international law. Right? So that is what India is saying consistently. First, what should happen? Violence should stop. Then what should happen? Diplomacy should ensue. What should be diplomacy be based on? It should be based on respect for UN Charter, principles of UN Charter and international law. All right? And then you can now add jargons like the path ahead for India is diplomacy, dialogue, and democracy. It can mean a lot of things. It means preference for diplomacy. What should happen? Dialogue should happen. Between whom? सबसे पहले तो उनके बीच में जो involved है, Russia and Ukraine. Maybe the international community can play a supportive role. All right? And democracy, meaning a decision should not be imposed. Right? So people are also important. This can mean a lot of things. But this is what we are saying, that this is something that India has advocated. Apart from these explanations, India has always included priority to humanitarian concerns and humanitarian support. To whom? To people affected by war. War is no mistake of people. All right? So India says priority to humanitarian concerns. Right? Sometimes India says humanitarian access must be ensured, meaning there are certain groups which work in conflict areas. For example, Red Cross. So the activities of International Red Cross is one humanitarian activity. जब लड़ाई चल भी रही है तो कोई तो होना चाहिए जो गिरे हुए लोगों को उठाए, इलाज करे, ऑल राइट, हॉस्पिटल चलाए. सो ये तो वॉर के समय में शुरुआत से चलता आ रहा है. ह्यूमैनिटेरियन जो मतलब है ना, ह्यूमैनिटेरियन जो वर्ड आता है वो जनरली इसी तरह के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आता है. कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के समय में ह्यूमन वेलफेयर के लिए क्या काम कर सकते हैं, दैट इज बेसिकली जनरली रेफरेंस टू ह्यूमैनिटेरियन. ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ यानी वॉर के बारे में कानून भी बहुत क्लियर है. जेनेवा कन्वेंशंस कहते हैं उनको. ऑलराइट, जेनेवा कन्वेंशंस. सो जेनेवा कन्वेंशंस आर्ग्यूज फॉर डिफरेंशिएटिंग बिटवीन कॉम्बटेंट्स एंड नॉन कॉम्बटेंट्स. मतलब वॉर कैसे होना चाहिए, अगर वॉर हो गया तो कैसे होना चाहिए भाई. जो लड़ने के लिए आ गए हैं भाई वो तो लड़ेंगे, लेकिन कुछ ऐसे भी लोग हैं जो लड़ने के लिए नहीं है वहां पे. नॉन कॉम्बटेंट्स जो लड़ रहे हैं और जो नहीं लड़ रहे हैं, दे शुड बी डिफरेंशिएटेड बिटवीन. ऑलराइट, फिर आर्म्स इंसिग्निया, इसका इस्तेमाल ये भी वेल डिफाइंड है. फिर अगर कोई घायल हो गया, प्रिजनर ऑफ वॉर बन गया, उसके भी राइट्स हैं. यू कांट टॉर्चर देम. ऑलराइट, you can't torture them. So basically these are Geneva conventions that generally we say are humanitarian aspects of any conflict. But we also have provided medical supplies. All right, so what does India say? That we have provided humanitarian assistance. In what sense? By providing medical supplies to both sides, to the people affected by war. All right, so conflict situation में एक priority क्या है? What is one priority? That you should take care of those who have been affected, especially civilians who have been affected by conflict. Right? So generally this is the meaning of humanitarian concerns. Right? In the situation of distress, taking care of those who are in distress. Then what is it that we have done? So all these reflect a few things. India's principles, but also India's interests. One of the first concrete actions that we took was evacuation of our citizens, so that is defending our interests. Then advocacy of principles, that has been consistent. And then what we have done is we have assessed the situation and we have made a certain consideration. What consideration? Defending our interests, right? Buying oil from Russia and working on an alternative payments mechanism. That is what we have done. Right? So this is what India should be doing. If your question is what is it that India should be doing? So we talked about three things. One, the larger geostrategic game, the larger global polarization, opportunities, challenges. समझ में आ गई बात? तीन तरह के रिस्पॉन्स. What did we talk about so far? One, there is a global polarization which is obviously happening. Ukraine-Russia crisis is an example of that. So opportunities and challenges. Two, there is a specific component of relations with Russia. So even in this context, there are certain constant steps that we can take. There is no need to think that there is anything different which is required. इसको कहते हैं horses for courses. First, break down any complex problems in important axes which you can address. किसी भी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम को एक साथ आप एड्रेस नहीं करते हैं, आप उसको तोड़ते हैं पहले. तो हमने तोड़ा. पहला क्या? ग्लोबल पोलराइजेशन, रिस्पॉन्स टू दैट. दूसरा क्या? मेंटेनिंग रिलेशंस विद रशिया इन दिस चेंजिंग टाइम्स. तीसरा क्या? दिस स्पेसिफिक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट. यूक्रेन रशिया कॉन्फ्लिक्ट एक एग्जाम्पल है किस चीज का? इंक्रीजिंग ग्लोबल पोलराइजेशन. राइट? Rise of old geopolitical fault lines. So in this examination, what you need is the ability to zoom in when required and zoom out when required. Don't get lost. इतना ज्यादा zoom in मत करो कि मतलब चक्कर आ जाए. Alright, zoom in when required and zoom out when required. Right? So then specific context में क्या करना चाहिए इंडिया को? ये करना चाहिए इंडिया को. Because this is what India has been doing. Meaning what India has been doing is very simple. India has been balancing two things, interests and principles. Interests and principles. यही तो बैलेंसिंग एक्ट है लाइफ का भी ना. लाइफ में हमको सब कुछ चाहिए लेकिन सब मिलता नहीं है. So what do we do? Sometimes we try to manage time, sometimes we try to manage economy, sometimes we try to manage polity, sometimes we try to manage history, sometimes we try to manage IR, sometimes we try to manage handwriting. All right. So any task is complex. Preparation for UPSC complex. मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? I'm preparing for UPSC. But what does this mean? It may mean certain things, studying certain subjects, reading, writing, basic components क्या है? और बेसिक कंपोनेंट्स कभी चेंज नहीं होते किसी भी सिचुएशन में. Alright, so in any case, foreign policy is all about balancing your interests and principles. So in any situation, this is what you are doing, and this is what we have talked about in the context of Russia. 2 questions. I hope, Ningthem, I answered your question. Can Russia be one-way bridge to India-China relations? So one-way bridge होगा कि नहीं होगा ये हमें पता नहीं, but हाँ, there is a bridge which is possible. And that is simply because there are platforms like RIC, Russia, India, China, or SCO, or the fact that India and Russia also have good relations and Russia and China also have good relations. So just as when Russia is doing something in Ukraine, our effort is not to be unnecessarily in getting involved in that. Russia would also be doing the same thing. All right? But in certain sense, we are also not those countries which are outrightly against Russia. So we should hope that Russia would not be outrightly against India. And that's why you should notice what Russia has been saying. That on matters between India and China, we are neutral. All right? We are neutral. And we encourage dialogue between these two countries. So अगर हम ये principle और interest को balance करते हैं, so we should expect that others would also do that. And we should be satisfied with that. All right? मुश्किल तब होगी when we think that Russia has tilted on the one side. All right? Or Russia has tilted in the context of issues on India towards China. Neutrality is also fine. Neutrality is also fine. At least it is not strengthening China. And good friendship of Russia and China is also fine. Because we also have a good friendship with Russia. So sometimes it happens. All the dialogue between India and China after 2020 has happened in places like Russia during meetings like SCO. All right? Platforms like RIC were working. So some channels are visible, some channels are not visible. So certainly this is a vital link. We can look at it both negatively as well as positively. But insofar as Russia is maintaining a neutral stance, that is fine. Insofar as Russia is committed to India's defense supplies, it is fine. We cannot expect, Russia can't expect that we come and fight within Ukraine. India cannot expect that Russia comes and fight it with China. India would have to fight its own fight. Russia would have to fight its own fight. Right? The problem would be, the only concern would be if India joins, let's say, US and West, or if Russia joins China. And that does not generally happen. That is the extreme of polarization. And that is something that India wants to avoid. So this is the end of discussions on Russia. There is another question by Amartya. Sir, the Russia-Ukraine war happened to restrict Ukraine from joining NATO, but even after the war, Ukraine is still joining. Then what does Russia get from war apart from some territory? Well, you have answered the question itself. Russia miscalculated. Russia slipped. There is no doubt that Russia is going to emerge. There is no way Russia is going to emerge victorious out of this situation. All right? Russia would have to pay the price. और अगर गलती की है तो प्राइस तो पे करना पड़ेगा ना. You calculated it wrongly कि हम जाएंगे, swiftly action करेंगे, न्यूक्लियर वेपन करेंगे और सब हो जाएगा. नहीं हुआ. So in life also what you think and what happens are two different things. So Russia definitely has miscalculated, is not going to gain much. But what Russia has done very clearly is this. It has upped the ante. It has told to the West in no uncertain terms that when it comes to its self-defined strategic interests, it is not going to back down. That is what Russia has done. The only thing that Russia has gained is a clear messaging. अब इधर उधर की बात नहीं, साफ बात. That you have to deal with us, we are not your friends. We have the capability to harm you. So now come and talk. ये अलग तरीके से भी हो सकता था, ये अब भी होगा. right? So if Russia is increasingly saying that we will use nuclear weapons, what Russia is saying is this: Russia's nuclear doctrine says that nuclear weapons would be used in the context of existential threat. So if Russia now from that has come to this, that we are open to using nuclear weapons, so it is itself saying that there is an existential threat, right? It is itself acknowledging there is an existential threat, right? And it has won some territory, which is fine, which creates a buffer zone, a band, which then it may militarily use to defend against any imaginary future attack by land. अब जरूरी थोड़ी ना कि आज अटैक लैंड से ही हो, तो रशिया थोड़ा पुराने तरीके से भी सोचता है ना, पुराने तरीके से, पहलवानों के तरीके से, क्रूड पावर के सेंस में, राइट? और यूएस के साथ क्या है, यूएस थोड़ा सा स्मार्ट है. सो यू वुड डिप्लॉय ऑल दैट इट हैज, सॉफ्ट पावर, हार्ड पावर, पीछे से यूक्रेन की भी मदद करेगा, इधर चाइना से भी बात शुरू कर दी, इधर पाकिस्तान से भी बात शुरू कर दी, ऑलराइट, यूरोप के साथ तो है ही. और अल्टीमेटली यू सी that out of all the conflicts in the long term, US is the one which benefits. Second World War, US का उदय होता है वहां से. तो रशियंस हमारे दोस्त हैं, पर थोड़ा सा दिल से ज्यादा सोच लिया इन्होंने, दिमाग से कम सोचा, and that's why they would have to pay the price. It's no brainer that Russia is at loss. अगर एक बड़े आदमी को, यानी कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी में भी ये बात हमेशा याद रखना, if a bureaucrat has to fight with a citizen, the victory is with the citizen. No, because you have a lot of power, and despite that you have to assert your power. If you have to assert your power, then it means that your power is hollow. All right, it is not useful. So रशिया ने ये गलती कर दी. किसको डरा रहा है? यूक्रेन को. ये देखने में भी अच्छा नहीं लगता. So Russia would lose out on public image also. All right, but long term में क्या देखेंगे भाई, रशिया के पास ज्योग्राफी है, वो तो कोई उससे नहीं ले सकता. Does Russia have nuclear weapons? Yes. है ना? Does Russia have a permanent membership of the Security Council? Yes. So Russia is weakened in that sense. It has spoiled its own game, but it has made it very clear that in any, और देखो ऐसा करके रशिया ने चाइना को भी सिग्नल दिया है. नहीं, ताइवान पे नहीं, चाइना के साथ बॉर्डर शेयर करता है ना रशिया. रशिया ने चाइना को भी सिग्नल दे दिया है कि भाई डोंट ट्रस्ट अस, क्योंकि रशियन बियर इज गोइंग टू डिफेंड इट्स टेरिटरी. बियर इज अ वेरी टेरिटोरियल एनिमल, ऑल राइट, एंड रशिया इज सिंबलाइज्ड बाय बियर. सो बियर हैज ऑल्सो सेंट अ मैसेज टू द ईगल, विच इज यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. इट हैज सेंट अ मैसेज टू द ड्रैगन, ऑल राइट, विच इज चाइना, राइट, कि ठीक है, दोस्ती वोस्ती सब ठीक है, लेकिन देर आर सर्टन कोर इंटरेस्ट दैट वी हैव, एंड व्हेन इट कम्स टू कोर इंटरेस्ट, स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटरेस्ट, नथिंग स्टॉप्स अस. We are ready to go to any extent. So that is also Russia has done. It has given the signal, meaning in the future don't take us lightly. Right? अब मान लो कोई आदमी बहुत कमजोर है लेकिन उसके हाथ में बंदूक है. आप बहुत पावरफुल हैं लेकिन उसके हाथ में बंदूक है ना, गोली तो चला ही सकता है, गोली तो आपको लगी सकती है. ये आप बाद में कैलकुलेट करते रहना गोली लगने के बाद कि ताकतवर कौन था, वो या आप, आपके पास क्या था. So it is all situational. So Russia has made it clear, take us seriously. It may have various implications. One, it may lead to a new era of negotiations between Russia and US. कैसा negotiation? जैसा कोल्ड वॉर के दौरान होता था. क्या होता था कोल्ड वॉर के दौरान? देतांत सुना है आपने? देतांत 1950s 60s, a period in which Russia and US started addressing their differences. है ना? तो क्या आया? NPT, नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन ट्रीटी, रशिया यूएस दोनों ने सपोर्ट किया. स्पेस ट्रीटी, रशिया यूएस दोनों ने सपोर्ट किया, बोथ सपोर्टेड. बिटवीन देम व्हाट हैपेंड? स्टार्ट स्ट्रेटेजिक आर्म रिडक्शन टॉक्स, ऑलराइट, सॉल्ट स्ट्रेटेजिक आर्म लिमिटेशन टॉक्स. सो इट मे लीड टू न्यू राउंड्स ऑफ निगोसिएशंस फॉर स्ट्रेटेजिक एग्रीमेंट्स बिटवीन यूएस एंड रशिया. लॉन्ग टर्म में तो यही होने वाला है, इसके अलावा कुछ नहीं. और चाइना को लग रहा था कि दुनिया की किताब आगे जाके वही लिख देगा, तो चाइना ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंड्स दैट नाउ इट हैज टू डील विद द रशियंस, राइट. एक चीज हमेशा कही जाती है कि रशिया वुड नॉट लाइक टू बी अ जूनियर पार्टनर ऑफ चाइना, पर रशिया करे तो क्या करे. रशिया डज नॉट हैव अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग इकोनॉमी, रशिया हैज अ बिग ईगो. So reality is that it would be dependent on China if it keeps on continuing these kinds of activities. But there also, it would like to remind China that हमारे पास पैसा ही कम है, वरना हम पुराने जमींदार हैं. All right? Just as people have this sense that we are the old elites. आजकल के लोग ज़्यादा अमीर हो गए हैं. Neo rich, novo rich जैसे कहते हैं. So Russia would also like to keep that sense. That remember, ये बस आज का है, कल कुछ और हो सकता है और कल कुछ और होगा. Right? So that's why we say, remember, there are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies in international relations. What is there? There are only permanent national interests. The better you understand how a country defines its national interests, the better you would be able to predict what kind of behavior you can expect from it. But always be ready to be surprised by countries also, right? Human beings and the behavior of countries can only be predicted to a certain extent. So it has all kinds of possibilities. उसमें जाने की जरूरत नहीं है आपको, जो होता जाएगा दिखता जाएगा. There is something that we will remember. What will we remember in any situation? What is it that India has done? Don't miss out on that. What is it that India has said? Don't miss out on that. All right? And then some examples. I hope we did that. Right. So now we go to Central Asia. Talking about Central Asia, that's another region that we are talking about it because it is close to Russia. So this is basically what we can call the heart of Eurasia, right? And Eurasia we have understood, I have repeated it n number of times. Rather than any complication, Eurasia simply is an idea that the Asian landmass and European landmass are continuous, right? There is nothing that separates Europe and Russia. Nothing like a Himalaya, for example, or nothing like an ocean. So if you go by land, travel by land, you can go start from one corner of China and go travel on land till Iberian Peninsula, that is Portugal. Meaning you can, in Eurasia, travel from the Pacific coast of China or Russia to the Atlantic coast of Portugal. That's one simple idea. जैसे हमने कहा था, what is Indo-Pacific? It's the idea that Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean are linked. So they are continuous entities. So that is simply imagining them as such. So Eurasia is a large landmass, that's it. And Eurasia then as a large landmass has various regions. One of course is the continent of Asia, part of Eurasia. Another of course is continent of Europe, part of Eurasia. There are regions within this, sub-regions. So this is the region of Central Asia as we see. The region of Central Asia. Largely where is it located? Largely where is it located? Eurasia. यही तो मैं कह रहा हूं. यही मैं कह रहा हूं. Try and trust your common sense. There is no special thing which is here. It is located in Eurasia. Can we say that? It is located in Asia. Can we say that? It's an important region of Asia. Can we say that? Can we say that it is a neighbor of Russia? Can we say that it is a neighbor of China? Can we say that it is a neighbor of Iran? All right. Can we say that these are also neighbors of Turkey and Caucasia? All right. Turkey इसलिए कह रहे because one stream of culture in this part of the world is influenced by Turkey. Another stream of culture is influenced by Persia. All right. तो यहाँ के culture में आपको क्या मिलेगा? Turkic influence and Persian influence. और उसके बाद in the 19th century who came? Russians. Russians came southwards, 19th century. 20th century what happened? These countries became part of Soviet Union. By 1922, they became part of Soviet Union. Alright, so you can think of Central Asia in many ways, but the simplest way is to think of it as the heart of Eurasia, meaning right in the middle of Eurasia. The transition between Asia and Europe. Alright, and of course, largely in terms of identity, they are Asian countries. Right? So one thing that you will notice is the countries surrounding Central Asia. Alright, the countries surrounding Central Asia. Right? Of course, their most important traditional neighbor has been Russia. Why? Because they were part of USSR. So Russia as well as Central Asian countries, all of them are what is called post-Soviet countries or former Soviet Union countries. They were all part of Soviet Union. All right. So that is the linkage that they have. So that's why you will see that in many parts of Central Asia, Russian is an official language. So Russia still has traditional influence. So Russian is very commonly spoken in these countries. And if you see, in some terms, the development of these countries has happened in such a way that traditional orientation of infrastructure is also towards north. All right? जैसे हम कहते हैं all roads lead to. So all road led to Moscow when it came to Central Asia. Why? Because it was part of one state, USSR. So its infrastructure traditionally is also. For example, this region is rich in oil and gas. So its traditional oil and gas flow was towards Soviet Union, not towards to Soviet Union, towards Russia, right? Then who is the other neighbor of Central Asia? This is China. And this is one of the most sensitive borders of China. Most sensitive. One, because here you have places like Xinjiang or Xinjiang, as many people would call it. Xinjiang, eh? Xinjiang keh lo, Xinjiang keh lo. Once I was teaching, so student, I said Xi Jinping. So a student said, actually it is pronounced as Xi Jinping. So student doesn't understand that if I start pronouncing it like the Chinese, most of the people would start having difficulty in understanding. So you are free to pronounce it as Xinjiang. But if you want to be close to how natives would call it, Xinjiang. That's something that people would say. But we are not native Chinese speakers, so it is fine. Alright? Xinjiang bolo. Chalo, koi baat. But samjho that Xinjiang is a sensitive region of China. It's on the border, it is underdeveloped, it is culturally different from mainland China, and now China is undertaking a large project of culturally transforming the Uyghurs. Right? So you will find the Uyghurs here in the Xinjiang province of China. Alright? So that's why this region is in news. And just look at it, that which countries surround it, which is this border, Central Asian border. Similarly, अभी तक आपने पढ़ लिया है बहुत कुछ, so you would know that there is something called BRI. If China wants to connect with rest of the world, one channel that it has identified is building a road network or surface transport network. Where would it pass through? Central Asian countries. Alright? And I hope you noticed, if you are reading newspaper, India refused to vote in favor of a resolution sponsored by West critical of China on Uyghurs. तो हमने UN में चाइना तक के खिलाफ वोट नहीं किया. होपफुली यू नोटिस्ड इट. ऑलराइट, जजमेंट में पहुंचने से पहले ये नोटिस करना, ऑब्जर्व करना बहुत जरूरी है. पहले फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड देन जज. सो दिस इज व्हाट इंडिया डज. सो दिस टेल्स यू वन थिंग, that India generally does not vote in favor of country-specific resolutions at the UN. If there is a resolution which points a finger to a particular country, India generally, when we say generally, it means not all times, but generally, India does not vote in favor of those resolutions. And it would be exceptions when India does that, and it would have reasons. For example, India voting in favor of resolution calling for probe in human rights violation where in Sri Lanka. Exception, right? Because that is one path that we found. But generally, India does not vote in favor of country-specific resolution. That is India's behavior, right? Still, we understand that China is another partner. Then, Afghanistan, right? A South Asian country, so to say. Some scholars include it or parts of it in Central Asia. But be that as it may, Afghanistan itself is a strategically important country because of what has happened there over the last 40 years. Great power rivalry, Soviet Union, USSR. Alright? And remember, when USSR came to Afghanistan, it was coming to a bordering country. Alright? At that point in time, Central Asian countries were part of the USSR. So unlike the Americans कहाँ चले जाते हैं? Vietnam. Alright? And they bomb Vietnam and they come out of it. अपने लोगों को भी मरवाते हैं, औरों को भी मारते हैं. For what benefit they only know. All right, so that is American great power behavior. What is Russian great power behavior? मेरे आसपास नहीं आना चाहिए किसी को. All right, I will defend my periphery. Both are destructive. Both are destructive, by the way. Right? Others have to pay the price. So Afghanistan again shares borders with Central Asian countries. So it's again another strategically important country itself for what is happening today, for what was happening yesterday. If India wanted to strengthen its efforts, for example, to stabilize Afghanistan in the past, meaning before 2021, Central Asian countries were important partners. Today, when we lack direct access to Afghanistan in the significant sense, our partnership with Central Asian countries is important. All right, and this is Iran. This is Iran. Iran is in news. What is happening in Iran? Hijab. All right, hijab protests are happening. So yesterday somebody asked me, why is it happening? Yeah, here people are saying that we will wear it. There they are saying that we will not wear it. So as a UPSC aspirant, you should simply understand that there can be a very, very non-controversial basic reason for that. And that is that all that people are fighting anywhere, first of all, is for choice, exercising their choice. Choice to wear something or choice to not wear something. What they are resisting is what they think, they perceive to be unjust. All right? So first recognize this also. And then you can think that whether it is right or not, wrong or not. But in any case, Iran is always in news for different reasons. It's another strategically important country. And for India, if you think, Iran is where we built the Chabahar port to access Afghanistan. All right? Iran is a close petroleum supplier to us. Iran is our gateway in many senses to Central Asia. But Iran is a West Asian country. All right? And this is the Caspian Sea. All right? This is the Caspian Sea. Right? So then if you look at the location of Afghanistan, of Central Asia, you can clearly say that Central Asia is geostrategically important or significant, right? This is how we have made sense of places. So every region can be called to be geostrategically significant. The only thing is, for whom? On what basis? So that's the only requirement that you have. So when we say Central Asia is geostrategically significant, we are simply saying that A, it is surrounded by multiple important countries. B, we are saying that it connects multiple important regions. It connects, for example, with West Asia, it connects with South Asia, it connects with China, it connects with Russia. That's what we are saying. And thereby, if these countries are thinking of their interests, they are thinking of this geography. If Russia is thinking of building a BRI or stabilizing its borders, it is thinking of Central Asia. If Russia is thinking of stabilizing its borders, all right, it is thinking of Central Asia. If Iran is thinking about its foreign interests, one orientation would be Central Asia. If the future of Afghanistan has to be thought about, they will think about Central Asia. And similarly, India, if it wants to expand its footprint in the Eurasian region, it would think of India. So various interests find this to be significant. And we understand that this has not been the case today. This has been the case since the ancient times. For example, the ancient Silk Route connecting China with Europe passed through Central Asia. For example, 19th century Great Game. You will remember Great Game? Recall Great Game? कहाँ बात की थी हमने इसकी? Afghanistan. Simply rivalry between Tsarist Russia and Imperial Britain. It played out in Central Asia, right? Russia made southwards expansion. And now people say new Great Game. So they are all reflections of new Great Game. Now people say what? New Great Game. A new Great Game is shaping. ऐसा कब से कह रहे हैं? मैं तो कम से कम 20 साल से सुन रहा हूं. न्यू ग्रेट गेम इज शेपिंग अप. तो टाइम फ्रेम क्या होता है यार का? 20 से 50 साल में चीजें क्लियर होती हैं. ऑल राइट. So difficulty that you will face always is when you try to only make sense of things in a very immediate time frame. It does not happen in a year. All right. So new great game is shaping, which is what? Which is simply Russia is interested here, China now is interested here, and US also has a series of meeting. All right. For example, we say meetings like C5+1. C5 मतलब कौन? 5 countries of Central Asia. +1 कौन? Afghanistan in the past. And this is a dialogue platform that the US has for engaging with Central Asian countries. So US also is interested here. So this is a reference to new kinds of rivalry which may play out in these geographies. Alright, कोई भी देश अपने जियोग्राफी पे राइवलरी प्ले आउट नहीं करने देना चाहता, ना ही अपनी पेरिफेरी में करने देना चाहता है. तो हर किसी को अब बड़ा खेल खेलने के लिए क्या चाहिए? एक खाली मैदान. राइट, जैसे मोस्ट ऑफ द बैटल्स इन नॉर्थ इंडिया आर फॉट इन पानीपत. खाली मैदान मिल गया, सो मराठा अंग्रेज लड़ लिए, मराठा मुगल लड़ लिए. ऑल राइट, वेरियस वॉर्स हैव बीन फॉट एट द बैटल ऑफ पानीपत. ऑल राइट. तो इसी तरह से व्हेन वी से स्ट्रैटेजिक राइवलरी, व्हेन वी से जियो स्ट्रैटेजिक राइवलरी, we say rivalry playing out in a particular geography. Between whom? भाई जिनके इतने बड़े बड़े एम्बिशन होंगे. Between ambitious countries, Russia, China and US, right? So it can mean a lot of things, but it simply gives you an understanding that it is geostrategically important. Now let's move forward to another idea, which is what? अब एग्जाम सेंट्रिक हो जाते हैं, कहानी सबको सुनना अच्छा लगता है ना? जैसे किसी क्लास में लोग कहते हैं कि सर आज बोरिंग हो गया. भाई जो चीज बोरिंग होनी है वो बोरिंग ही होगी. राइट, एंटरटेनमेंट से बाहर आना पड़ेगा हमको. सो देन नहीं, किसी ने मुझे, कभी कभी स्टूडेंट आते हैं वो बताते हैं कि सर आज मजा नहीं आया. तो मेरा सिंपल जवाब होता है कि भाई आपको मजा दिलाना मेरा काम नहीं है, बताना मेरा काम है कि क्या पढ़ना है, कैसे पढ़ना है. एंटरटेनमेंट की दुनिया से बाहर भी निकलना होता है. और प्रॉब्लम यह है कि आजकल हर चीज ऐसे ही दिखती है ना. ग्रैंड एंट्री, ऑलराइट, ग्रैंड एंट्री ऑफ दिस, रॉयल लाइफ ऑफ दैट. आम आदमी तो कोई रह नहीं गया. सो देर आर नो टीचर्स, देर आर नो स्टूडेंट्स, देर आर एंटरटेनर्स एंड इन्फ्लुएंसर्स. लो, अब पीपल हु वांट टू लिव इन अ ट्रेडिशनल रोल, व्हाट डू दे डू? राइट, दे आर ऑल्सो फोर्स्ड टू अडेप्ट टू द न्यू वर्ल्ड. किताबें लोग पढ़ते नहीं आजकल. सो इसीलिए आ गया न्यूज इन शॉर्ट्स. हर चीज किस में चाहिए? शॉर्ट में. क्यों? बिकॉज देर इज गूगल विच टेल्स यू देर इज सो मच टू नो. इफ यू डोंट नो यू विल मिस आउट. बट while the reality of life is that no matter howsoever you try, you will miss out. Right? It has always been about one equation, which is finite mind and infinite to know. That is an equation that is not going to change. There would always be infinite to know, and you will always have a finite mind. So then what do? We try and decide what would be my focal length. मेरे काम का क्या है? Right? Vishal is saying break. Break हम ले चुके हैं. All right. So then start noticing certain things. Let's start noticing these countries. Make a list of them. This is Kazakhstan, the largest country in Central Asia. All right, largest country in Central Asia geographically. What is the capital? The old name is Astana. Now it is called Nur Sultan. Now it is called Nur Sultan. All right. So that is Kazakhstan. Now move clockwise. Next to Kazakhstan is Kyrgyzstan. This is Kyrgyzstan. What is the capital of Kyrgyzstan? Bishkek. So you must have seen questions which UPSC asks for matching. All right, correct matches. These are ideal candidate for those correct matches. All right. So Kyrgyzstan, the capital is Bishkek. And then again clockwise, south of Kyrgyzstan is Tajikistan. Tajikistan's capital is Dushanbe. And all of these capitals are news because sometimes SCO meeting would happen, sometimes our foreign minister would go there, some conference would happen. All right. So that's why they are in news. Dushanbe is the capital of Tajikistan. All right. And then let's move further clockwise. This is Uzbekistan. The capital of Uzbekistan is Tashkent. All right. And then move further clockwise. This is Turkmenistan. All right. What is the capital of Turkmenistan? Ashgabat. Right. तो दुनिया भर की कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इंफॉर्मेशन पता है हमको, but only looking at the atlas twice or thrice gives us this information which may be helpful in correcting a question or two. Right. So now these are the capitals of these states. Kazakhstan obviously being the largest in terms of geography, Uzbekistan is the largest country in terms of demography, in terms of population. Uzbekistan is the largest. Any other thing that you notice in this region? So one thing that you notice, geographically, Tajikistan is just across the Wakhan corridor. So geographically closest to India, meaning Delhi to Dushanbe is closer a distance as compared to Delhi to Chennai. All right. Delhi Chennai की जितनी दूरी है, Delhi Dushanbe की दूरी उससे कम है. All right. So these become ways of talking about things. So ये जो है closest to India in terms of geographical distance. Tajikistan. And then you have Uzbekistan. What is special about Uzbekistan? Uzbekistan is a ex-prime minister, former prime minister, सब कर लेंगे, is a doubly landlocked country. All right. And it is the only doubly landlocked country in Asia. And it is only the one of the two landlocked countries, doubly landlocked countries in the world. So what is a doubly landlocked country? A landlocked country or a landlocked region is one which does not have access to open sea. So वो landlocked हो गया जिसका coast नहीं है open sea पे. And a doubly landlocked country, then it should be obvious to you. What is obvious? That a doubly landlocked country is one not only which itself is landlocked, but its neighbors are also landlocked. All right. तो दो लेयर के पैकेट में पैकेज्ड है ये देश. Itself landlocked and its neighbors are also landlocked. Which is the other doubly landlocked country? I leave it for you to find. All right. किसी ने कह दिया, क्या कहा? लिक्टेनस्टाइन. लिक्टेनस्टाइन किन के बीच में है? डबली लैंडलॉक्ड नहीं होगा ना अगर जर्मनी के बगल में होगा तो. स्विट्जरलैंड एंड ऑस्ट्रिया. ऑल राइट. बिटवीन स्विट्जरलैंड एंड ऑस्ट्रिया there is a very small country which you will find it difficult to locate on the map called Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is another doubly landlocked country because Austria and Switzerland are landlocked. Right. So Uzbekistan is a doubly landlocked country. Right. Then this map also tells you which countries from Central Asia have a coast on the Caspian Sea. Two Central Asian countries have a coast on the Caspian Sea. Which ones? Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. These are the two countries from Central Asia which have a coast on the Caspian Sea. So which other countries surround the Caspian Sea? So from Central Asia, अगर याद करना है तो break down कर लो. From Central Asia, Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. From West Asia, Iran. Then Russia. और इधर Azerbaijan. All right. That is all UPSC asks you to do when something is happening anywhere. कि इतना ही कर लो बस. फॉरेन पॉलिसी बाद में बना लेना. ऑल राइट. जब IFS में जाओ और आइडियली IFS में जाने के बाद सर्व फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम and become the foreign minister of India just as Dr. Jaishankar did. All right. That is what UPSC is doing. Any other thing that you notice? You notice this. This is Aral Sea. Aral Sea is an important geographic feature of this region, and it's an important example of the impact of anthropogenic activities on human environment, how human activities are affecting environment. So Aral Sea is shared between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Kyrgyzstan and, so where is Kyrgyzstan? This is Kyrgyzstan. How is it doubly landlocked? China is its neighbor and China has a coast. All right. तो कजाकिस्तान का कोस्ट कहाँ है ओपन सी में? You are talking about Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea itself is an inland sea, right? So it is not considered to be like other seas, an open sea. All right. So we said a country which does not have a coast in the open sea. ये हमने कहा था ना. तो Caspian Sea itself is a landlocked inland sea, right? And this is one river which is coming. What is this river? This river is Volga. So river Volga discharges into where? The Caspian Sea. Volga is the longest river in Russia. Volga is the longest river. अगर आप रशिया को यूरोप का पार्ट इंक्लूड कर लें, so Volga would be the longest river. So Volga empties into Caspian Sea, right? Similarly, if you know something of Russia's geography, you know world's deepest and largest freshwater lake is located in Russia, Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is world's deepest lake, but also by the volume of water, not the area. Volume of water, it is world's largest freshwater lake. These are some of the things that UPSC ऐसे ही खेल खेल में मनोरंजन में question पूछ लेता है. And these are not very difficult questions for you which you need to prepare separately. So what you will do is you will go back and look at your atlas and you will do one thing on your own. Simply, just as this year UPSC asked which countries share a border with Afghanistan. So you will make a list of these countries. Obviously their capitals are there and we have written something special about each of them. All right. Now you will simply make a sense which Central Asian countries share borders with each other. All right. Jaise Kazakhstan has a border with Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, but does not have a border with Tajikistan. All right. ये आप काम करेंगे खुद से. So this is basically what we have seen, and this is the larger region of the small map that we were talking about earlier, right? So was Kazakhstan in news this year? Was Kazakhstan in news this year? Yes, it was in news. Before Ukraine crisis in January 2022, violence broke out in Kazakhstan on increasing energy prices. Then what happened? Russia had sent troops, all right, to help Kazakhstan. So this region has certain organizations, certain agreements which may be significant in this context. For example, CSTO, right? What is CSTO? What is CSTO? Central Security Treaty Organization. CSTO was created by Russia along with some post-Soviet states, right? So that is a collective security arrangement. CSTOs has been there since 2001. All right. What else binds Central Asian countries with some of its neighbors? What else binds Central Asian countries with some of its neighbors? Any idea? SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which started as Shanghai 5 in 1995. China started talking with its new neighbors in a group which was referred to as Shanghai 5. All right, Shanghai 5. and Shanghai 5 became SCO in 2001. Alright, so these are arrangements that you will find in this region which comprise all these countries, either CSTO or SCO. Right? One country in this region has traditionally adopted political neutrality, and that is Turkmenistan. So Turkmenistan is not a part of these arrangements. It's not part of SCO also. Alright, it is not part of SCO. It generally has adopted neutrality in international relations. Right, generally. So these are some of the regional arrangements. CSTO, where you have Russia, SCO, where you have China plus Russia, a Russian initiative, a Chinese initiative. So it seems that this gives you a simple idea that what is important in Central Asia is the process of bringing these countries on a common platform. Why? Because they became states very recently. Only after 1991 they became independent. So thereby they always had challenges of state building. Right? So पहले तो बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि ये तो देश बनना ही नहीं चाहते थे. They were very happy under USSR. वो तो Boris Yeltsin had the ambition of becoming the president of Russia. So the Russians actually created these countries. They were very happy under USSR. So what happened after they had to become country? They had the task of building the state. Leader कौन बनेगा? Capital कहाँ होगी? Ruling system कैसा होगा? So state building was their common challenge. And they also have challenges regarding their borders, right? So for example, in this region, there are challenges which are faced in the context of the borders between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. अब ये लड़ रहे हैं. क्यों लड़ रहे हैं? Because the Soviets had created a border which separated people in different territories. But what is this? This is majorly a steppe land, meaning major grassland is here. Some parts of this region are cold and arid. So they have water resources, abundance of water resources, but in some parts water resources are unevenly distributed. So they had their regional issues on which there may be conflicts. Water, border. So cattle rearing is an important activity here. But for cattle rearing, what do you need? You require land, grasslands, right? Where your cattle can graze, grazing lands. So किस लिए लड़ रहे हैं ये? Grazing land. Who has the better access to grazing land? And these are all the legacies of Soviet time. The way Soviet Union determined border boundaries between these countries. So they never had the opportunity, for the most part, to define their modern boundaries. They never had the opportunity, for the most part, to define access to resources that they have. So this region has challenges of state building because they were new. They only became independent states in 1991. They had issues of border because again they were new states and their borders dated back to the USSR time, and uneven distribution of resources. Though the region as a whole is abundant in water resources, but access of water is uneven. So thereby they have these kinds of conflicts. Now why SCO or CSTO? Because they are bordering countries for Russia, they are bordering countries for China. So China wanted to stabilize its borders, and it made sense to have a collective initiative where it has its neighbors. So then it moved to the formula of Shanghai 5 dialogue, and then it became SCO. And Russia wanted to maintain the Soviet era relations in some ways. अब आप उसको Soviet Union नहीं कह सकते because it has collapsed. So Russia made certain initiatives of which these countries became part, and obviously Russia being the large country, it would be the leader, CSTO. Right? So Collective Security Treaty Organization. CSTO is Collective Security Treaty Organization. All right, Collective Security Treaty. I must have mentioned, may have mentioned Central. All right, Collective Security Treaty Organization. So you see that their politics are being determined in many ways by their larger neighbors. So that's why there is also a desire among these countries. क्या चाहिए इन देशों को? What is it that they would want? What is it that they would want? Now you have an idea of their nature, where they are located, how they are situated, and what has happened in the past. So what would they want? क्या? Independence तो है ही इनके पास. Stability. By first of all, they would like access to open sea. Access to open sea. And that's why a country like Iran or location of Afghanistan, going beyond Afghanistan, Pakistan, going beyond Pakistan, India, may be of interest to them, because these relations provide them an opportunity to diversify their foreign engagements, and also these Asian countries can provide them access to the Indian Ocean region. So that is what these countries would like. First of all, diversify their relations so that their options increase, and then only they can balance their relations with their larger neighbors like China and Russia. No country wants to be dependent on anyone. No country. It's in the interest of no country. They don't want to be dependent on anyone. So that is what they want. But there is always a gap between what you want and what you can have. All right. So remember, when you look at Central Asia, about these things. So once we have talked about these things, we simply can start talking about India's relations with Central Asia. All right. And we do nothing but develop an understanding on the basis of what we have learned. We don't need to create anything new. Sir Charanveer says connectivity. Connectivity is a correct word here. So if you see, we can say that the Central Asian republics with whom India has cultural and civilizational linkages, are strategically important for it. So that is something that you wrote as a statement of introduction of India Central Asia relations, that Central Asian republics with whom India has cultural and civilizational linkages are strategically important for India. A simple suggestion of way of writing. All right. So then this gives you an opportunity to simply open up the relationship in terms of examples. So we can say that these countries are strategically important for India. So why? Cultural and civilizational engagements. Engagements in what sense? In the sense of linkage between ancient Silk route and the spice route, meaning trade of India which passed through this region, traders of India who passed through this region, linked India and Central Asian region in the past. If you don't want to go to the Aryan migration theory, etc., etc., all right, or if you don't want to go to the Indo-European family of languages, how there are linguistic similarities between languages like Sanskrit and languages spoken in this region, right? We understand that Buddhism, for example, is a product of this period, how Buddhism traveled through this route. So you will go to places like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, you will find old ruins of archaeological sites which tells us about the Buddhist past of this particular region, right? Buddhism traveled to this also. You come to medieval times, you can say that Sufism as a particular stream in Islam developed through multiple influences, Turkic, Persian, and many of the Sufi saints who came to India came through Central Asia. So Sufism is another stream of civilizational linkage that flowed to India from Central Asia. Buddhism, Sufism, right? And then you can say that some cultural linkages date back to the USSR period. For example, something that you will find which is mentioned many a times are examples like the cinema of Raj Kapoor. For example, Mera Naam Joker. These were popular movies in USSR or USSR controlled Central Asia, right? So that is another way in which we can say that we have cultural and civilizational linkages. And then we can say that similarities, and that is how cultures and civilizations are built. Cultures and civilizations are never built in isolation. They are built through exchanges. There is something indigenous about them, but also any culture and civilization would also have borrowed elements. All right? So that's why you will find similarities. For example, there is a debate, where is the samosa from? You go to Central Asia, samosa? Samosa? Samosa तो समझते हैं आप? खाते भी होंगे? खाते समय ये नहीं सोचते होंगे कहाँ से आया है? हाँ? So you go to Central Asia, you will find samosa. Alright, so they will also call it samosa. Now ask them कि समोसा कहाँ से आया? तो यहाँ पे कोई व्लॉग बनाएगा, नहीं जी, समोसा तो यहीं से आया, ये तो झूठ है कि वहां से आया. वहां से आया, यहाँ से आया, कहीं से आया. Is it tasty or not? It is. So that is what matters. That is how cultures develop. Samosa और पुलाव. पुलाव सुना है आपने? In India, people from Lucknow and people from Hyderabad or people from Kolkata would say whether it is pulao or biryani. Alright? Pulao or biryani. Pulao also is a dish which is common between Central Asia and India. Now you keep on fighting on its origin or you look at it as a matter of commonality. कहाँ से आया? किसका है? या common है? ये आप समझिए. Then many of the words that we use are of Persian origin. All right? It is also very common. For example, we say gilas, maze, kursi. कहते हैं हम. Unless you start finding your own words for that. So these are also elements of language which are part of how languages and cultures exchange with each other. All right? So that's why we have similarities of language, similarities of cuisine, similarities of clothing or dresses that we wear. So that is what India or any official document in India would be highlighting, that this is the similarity that we have with Central Asia. For example, Hindi, the way we speak, is not a very old language. It's a very modern language, new language. And one of the first couplets leading to what became Hindi, Khadi Boli, came from someone called Amir Khusro. सुना है आपने नाम? Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro said, एक थाल मोती से भरा, सबके सर पे औंधा धरा. Those of you who don't speak Hindi, please pardon me, but I am saying that Amir Khusro can be said to be one of the initial figures behind the development of Hindi as a modern language in India. And he had an Uzbek ancestry. Many people like Mirza Ghalib, or at least have heard of Mirza Ghalib, a poet from Delhi. All right? And many people in young age start liking poetry. शेर व शायरी करने लगते हैं. Poetry. Poetry is for young people. Right? Mirza Ghalib also has ancestry in Central Asia. Now, Mughals also came from Central Asia. Mughals also came from Central Asia. Whether you consider Mughals to be part of India's culture or you see Mughals otherwise, it doesn't change the fact that they came from Central Asia. So that is the commonality that we point out, no matter what your personal views are. But the facts are facts, that is a linkage that we have. And that is what we point out. We say that we have much in common. We share much in common. All right. So where did this year's SCO summit took place? Samarkand. Samarkand. Samarkand is an important trading town in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan. Samarkand, Bukhara, important trading towns. All right. Now we all react similarly to anything which is alien to us. Anything which is not familiar to us, we start making fun of it. Right? So North makes fun of South, South makes fun of North, East makes fun of West, West makes fun of East. This is what happens. Right? Chaliye. So, cultural and civilizational similarities are there. Why is it strategically important? Otherwise, soft power elements are shared. It is important for its energy, India's energy security. Why is Central Asia important? India's energy security. Meaning, it is a closed geography with the concentration of important sources of, hydrocarbons in the Caspian basin. Countries like Kazakhstan, countries like Turkmenistan have rich reserves of oil and gas. So one thing that India wants is diversification of its sources of supply. So for energy security in the area of petroleum, but also if you see, India has certain other interests. Supply of uranium from this region also. Supply of uranium from this region also is important. For example, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. These are two important suppliers of uranium for India's civil nuclear program. So that's why it is strategically important. Energy security. It is economically also important. If we are looking for untapped markets, so Central Asia has a population of around, total population around 70 million. All right, around 70 million population of Central Asia makes it an important future market for us if we can think of interest in that long term. 70 million people, meaning there are opportunities for investments, right? Market and investments. If opportunities can be found here, markets and investments. All right. And then we find that this region becomes important from the perspective of another priority in today's international relations, that is connectivity. So basically connectivity efforts in terms of location in Eurasia, location which is important from the perspective of transit, connect or transit connections between different regions. So future of connectivity also makes Central Asia important for us. So while there is BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, of which India is not a part, which focuses on Central Asia in some ways, there are other initiatives going on in this region. As I said, what these countries want is connectivity. So they are interested in multiple forms of connectivity project. So we have something called the Ashgabat Agreement. India is a part of Ashgabat Agreement. Ashgabat Agreement aims to promote trade transit connectivity in this particular region. Or you have another agreement of which India is a part, TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. These are the examples of connectivity. Or there are other corridors which have been proposed or are being built in this region. Lapis Lazuli corridor. Lapis Lazuli corridor. So if you are thinking of expanding your own interests, or if you are thinking of competing with China, Central Asian countries become important. Why else is Central Asia important? For goals like stability in Afghanistan. If India is interested or was ever interested in stabilizing Afghanistan, from that perspective also, the Central Asian countries become important because they are friendly to us and they share a border with Afghanistan and they have common concerns in Afghanistan. Remember, if you look at this map also tells you another thing, that Afghanistan ultimately, and there is a question that UPSC asks, shares borders with Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and each of these ethnicities are a minority community in Afghanistan. So there are inter-ethnic linkages or trans-border ethnic linkages that Central Asian countries have in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country. Pashtuns are the largest, but it has minorities like the Turkmen, but mainly the Uzbeks and the Tajiks in this area, in the northern area. So that's why you would have seen in Afghanistan, you must have noticed that there was a resistance in what is called Panjshir Valley. This resistance was led by people of Tajik origin. All right. So what happens in Afghanistan is important for them. And then there are Shia communities, people of Shia community called Hazaras, the Hazara community. So Iran is interested in the welfare of the Hazara community, which is also a minority in Afghanistan. So if we are thinking about regional issues, if we are thinking about playing a larger role in the future, if we are thinking about defending our interests in Afghanistan, or if we are thinking about stability in Afghanistan, Central Asian countries are important partners. So I think this should be enough to say why Afghanistan is Central Asia is important for us. Or is there any other point that you would like to add? Right? It is enough. So then what we see is this. India's engagement with Central Asia can be in the modern times, 20th century, 21st century, seen through the USSR period. So India had privileged access to Central Asia before Central Asian countries became independent. For example, during the USSR time, India was the only country which was allowed to open a consulate in Tashkent, right? In the 1980s, India had opened a consulate in Tashkent. At that point in time, Central Asia was not independent. So India's access to Central Asia is ensured by its good relations with USSR. All right? And then you have after 1991. After 1991, India is going through a phase of diversification of its economy, as well as in that context, it is looking at which can be its prospective partners. So we see that we chose East Asia, Southeast Asian countries as part of Look East. But that is a time where India is looking everywhere, looking west, looking east, looking north, right? So there were prime ministerial visits. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao in that particular period visited countries like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. So sometimes it is said that India had a look north approach, meaning India initially interacted with Central Asian countries for the purpose of developing relations with them. All right, it was argued that there is an opportunity there. What is the opportunity? That this is a diverse region which faces problems in state building, and India has a vast experience of state building, institution building. So India can help these countries in state building. So that was the potential, right? So look north approach, sometimes it is mentioned in the context of India's outreach to Central Asian countries after 1991. Because after 1991, what we have is Central Asian republics, the 5 of them, of which we have made a list. Central Asian republics became independent. And then we see that it is only in 2012 that India launches something like a Connect Central Asia, a dedicated policy towards Central Asia. Connect Central Asia policy is launched in 2012. And then you will see that this partnership has further grown. For example, 2015, the Prime Minister visited the 5 Central Asian countries. 5 Central Asian countries was visited by Prime Minister. He went there on a bilateral visit. So then we are signaling that you are important to us by these mechanisms. And what is the reason? The reasons that we have discussed. These are the reasons why we think Central Asia is significant. 2019, India Central Asia dialogue begins. Meaning India and Central Asia at the level of foreign ministers start a dialogue called India Central Asia Dialogue, 2019. All right. And then 2020, initiatives like India Central Asia Business Council is started to promote B2B, business to business engagements. And then what happened? You should be aware of it. क्या हुआ इस साल? इंडिपेंडेंस डे हो गया. क्या हुआ? 2022 first India Central Asia Summit. India Central Asia Summit, right? Meaning 26th January, Republic Day, we had invited the heads of states of Central Asian countries to be chief guests. But it did not happen because at that point in time, Omicron. All right. So then we had a virtual meeting of heads of states, the first summit between India and Central Asia. All right. And remember, China also held in the similar time frame a China Central Asia Summit. So that gives you an idea that not only us but others are also interested in Central Asia. And this simply gives you an idea of transition of India's approach towards Central Asia, right? Starting with the USSR period, moving through the initial period when we started making contacts, then coming to the period when we launched a dedicated policy, then a closer focus on Central Asia in terms of increased number of visits, and then more dialogue platforms like India Central Asia Dialogue, India Central Asia Business Council, and India Central Asia Summit coming into picture, right? So then we see why connect with Central Asia, why make efforts to contact Central Asia. There are few things. While we have complementarities in relations, we have complementarities in relations which need to be built upon. There are challenges. Complementarities जिसको समझ में नहीं आ रहा वो पिछले points देख लेगा. Which is why Central Asia is important for us. While Central Asia would like to diversify its foreign policy, its connectivity options, India is interested for different reasons in Central Asia. That is the meaning of it. But there are challenges in transforming this complementarity into reality. What are the challenges? One obvious challenge is lack of direct access to Central Asia. Lack of direct access to Central Asia. That's one thing that is very clear. We don't have geographic window to Central Asia. We are not connected with Central Asia geographically. So how did we reach there? The shortest route is through Pakistan, but we don't have good relations with Pakistan. So we find that that option is not there. Denial of land transit by Pakistan. Denial of land transit by Pakistan. So we don't have any direct option there. And another weakness that we have is interests of other important actors in the region. So that's another challenge that we have, that we are not the only ones. This space is being looked through interest by other countries also. So other countries may either have a direct geographical presence like Russia or China, or may have larger economic presence in this region like China. So that's always a challenge that we have. So in that context, what is it that makes sense? What is it that India has been doing in Central Asia? So we can see that India's effort then has been, what is India's efforts? To promote connectivity in Central Asia. What is it that we want in Central Asia? Promote connectivity, all forms of connectivity, right? Physical, digital. Meaning India is interested in connectivity initiatives in Central Asia, whatever eases the connectivity constraints. So that's why you would see any examples? Any examples? लिखने के अलावा अगर ध्यान दिया हो समझने पे, any examples? चाबहार पोर्ट हो या अशगाबाद एग्रीमेंट, तापी, all right? So that is what India is doing to promote connectivity. That is India's efforts. How does India aim to address these challenges, these constraints? By A, primarily focusing on connectivity. B, what is it India doing in this region? To participate in regional initiatives. That is what India is doing. What kind of regional initiatives? Example, to participate in regional initiatives, SCO, all right? SCO has Central Asian countries also as its members. So that is what you will see. That is how India is trying to first gain some presence in this region, SCO, and improving bilateral engagements. So, barring Turkmenistan, over the years, India has developed or calls all the other Central Asian countries strategic partners. We have developed strategic partnership with Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. Right? So we are focusing on improving bilateral engagements in whatever way we can, and that's what you will see. पहले मैंने example दे दिया, है ना? This is not only history, that is also example of what India is doing. So these are the three kinds of things that India generally has focused upon. That in order to improve our engagement with Central Asian countries which are strategically important for us, we will focus on improving connectivity, digital connectivity. You give me the example. Are you an engineer by training? No. Okay, any engineer by training. Digital connectivity नाम कह दिया, mention मतलब क्या है? How do you ensure digital connectivity? Either by satellite connectivity or by laying down a broadband. When we say digital connectivity in India, what do we mean? What are we doing? Optic fiber बिछा रहे ना? Right? Digital India कहते हैं. So that is what we are saying. Meaning now we have better opportunity to connect. And if you have read the current affairs, SCO meeting happened this year. What is it that the Prime Minister proposed? China, Russia से फुर्सत मिली तो you must have also seen that India has proposed a digital highway for members of or between members of SCO. So meaning that simply means connectivity by digital means. It can mean through satellite links, telemedicine, all right, tele-education, that is also digital connectivity, or by using any instrument of ICT. That can mean laying down of optic fiber connection between these countries. It can mean anything, right? We are saying that India is working on, and then you will start finding examples. If you see this year's SCO summit, India has proposed a digital highway. And you may also recall that we have already traveled through a region called, कहाँ गए थे हम इससे पहले? रशिया से पहले क्या बात की थी हमने? Immediately before Russia, Pacific Islands, FIPIC. What did we say there? What is it that India is proposing? Creation of a pan-Pacific Islands e-network, digital connectivity. Then there also I had given you an example. I had mentioned India in Central Asia is also proposing this, and I also given you the example that India has built a pan-African e-network project. When we go to Africa, we will find such projects are either through tele-linkages, right? Satellite linkages, or you can think even in terms of laying down a common digital network for these countries. आज तो टेक्नोलॉजी की मदद से कैसे भी हो सकता है ये, right? But this is one idea of digital connectivity. And digital connectivity promotes what? It promotes, expedites the exchange of information, be it for entertainment or be it for commerce or be it for medical purposes or any other purposes. What is it facilitating? Exchange of information. And when we said that connectivity, we had said that connectivity is anything or any modality that expedites the movement of goods, people, capital, information. Goods and people would move through physical connectivity, roads, railways. Information capital these days moves through digital pathway. All right. So it can mean creating a dedicated, let's say, digital connectivity can also mean creating a dedicated connect between India's banking channel and Central Asia's banking channel. So it simply means connecting through digital means. It can take many forms, but it would involve the use of digital technology. That's it. And we have some examples. Pan-African e-network, through which we have announced something like e-Arogyasri. So e-Arogyasri disburses medical support through digital means. All right. And e-Vidyasri. E-Vidyasri is about sharing of education. Africa आएंगे तो करेंगे बात. But I now understand that you keep on forgetting what I teach you in previous classes because you are still searching for special information. All right. Digital connectivity. So, for example, Prime Minister has talked about digital highway. But it does not mean that a physical highway would be created and then a cable would be laid. All right. It would take a lot of time. It simply means whatever digital means are available or can be used to connect us. Connect in what sense? Flow of information, exchange of information. All right. So, digital highway. So, it can mean payment systems also. It can mean a common website also. It can mean a lot of things. Right. चलिए, digital highway that India has proposed at SCO. Physical का example बहुत सारा मैंने आपको याद दिलाया. INSTC. All right. Chabahar, Ashgabad agreement, we have talked about it, right? And improvement of bilateral engagement, which means either improving or increasing the number of visits to these countries. Example, 2015 Prime Ministerial visit, or every year you will find foreign ministers of these countries coming to India, India's foreign minister going to these countries, all right? So that is what we are focusing on right now, to take advantage of the opportunities available in Central Asia and to minimize the disadvantages in this context, which we have identified threefold. Lack of direct connectivity, B, related to a denial of land transit by Pakistan, so we can't reach it directly. C, the presence of interest of other actors who are directly geographically present there or who may have larger financial capacity. So these are some of the things that we need to address always, and that is how we are doing. We have talked about major examples. When we meet next in the next class, what we will be doing is we will wrap up India Central Asia And majorly we will focus on talking about organizations like SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and INSTC. And then after Central Asia, we move to the next region that we will move to, remember, is Europe. All right, Europe. And then after that, we will go to US. And then what is remaining in terms of region is Africa and West Asia, right? And then organizations and diaspora. So this is what is remaining, just as a reminder to you. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to raise it. If not, please leave. This would be all for today. Sharanveer, South America is only covered when it is in current affairs, because there have been no questions from South America traditionally in the examination. South America is important from the perspective of optional. But keeping in mind its necessity of its coverage, A, it is part of the printed material so that you have the information. And B, remember, whenever there is any current event related to Latin America, South America, we cover it.